Welcome back, and I can tell you now that the boys up front, the 6 of them, are beginning to move a little bit away. Bit of a surprise, Paul, 37 kilometres to go.
Well, it could be just a small moment of fluctuation in the main field before they really turn up the screws in anger. Let's not forget, we do realise that over the last 40 kilometres, the main field can peg back at least a 4 or 5 minute advantage. But it is rather an indication, Bob, that those guys at the front are working exceptionally well together.
This is a great little breakaway here. They're all pulling through. No one's sitting on, except perhaps Bruce Seguin from the Fossa Bortolo team. We haven't seen him do too much work. What he wants to do is conserve his strength, so if they do get caught, he might still have a little bit of energy to lead out Alessandro Patacchi, who is the best sprinter of the race so far. The most famous, however, is Mario Cipollini, because he tied that Alfredo Binda record, and he'll be looking to beat that. I'm not sure if it's going to be so easy today, because there's a big U-turn in the middle of the last kilometer, 180 degrees with about 400 meters left. It looks like Carmine Castellano, the race director of the Giro d'Italia, having a bit of trouble with the crowds yesterday. They went so crazy when Cipollini won the stage that they rushed into the streets, and the photographers from the papers couldn't get an elbow in edgewise. All the fans going crazy for Cipollini, and finally had to sweep them out of there.
Well, I'm not surprised. He's the most popular man on the race, and yesterday was really a special occasion. News of one rider giving up today. It happened at the feeding station just on the 100-kilometre point. There he is, Ard Vierhouten of the Lotto Domo team, which means that Robbie McEwen's team is weakened by one more rider now. They've lost 2 men. Rick Verbrugge going out. He didn't start on stage 4 after hurting himself on the descent when he crashed coming in towards the end of stage 3. So there's 2 blanks now on Lotto, and there'll be 3 on that left-hand side soon, Paul, because Robbie will go home, I'm sure.
And I think he might get joined by his mate Nick Gates, the other Australian on the squad too, where we've actually not seen a great deal of since the start of the Giro d'Italia. He was brought across to this team during the winter transfer season by Robbie McEwen, a special request to the organisation of the team to bring on this Australian who we've followed his career for many, many years. We saw him win the Commonwealth Bank Cycle Classic back in Australia quite a fair time ago. He's been looking around to get himself a professional contract, but I certainly have not seen an awful lot of him here on the television cameras.
No, but he's had he's won races as a pro from smaller teams in Germany, but I spoke to him in April and he said he was beginning to get it right. I was a little bit surprised to see him on the start list here of the Giro. I actually think his effort will, even when Robbie goes home, I think it will be necessary psychologically for Nick to try and finish this tour.
Well, he needs to. It's important for a bike rider to finish a 3-week race, because as Bob and I have discussed on many occasions, riding and finishing a 3-week bike race not only gives you a psychological boost because you feel that you can take on anything else after that, but it also changes your body physiologically.
Physiologically speaking, you become such a much more efficient machine. You can pedal for hours in the saddle, day after day. You don't get as fatigued after you've done one of the grand tours. You don't get sick at all, and your body changes a little bit physiologically. Maybe a little bit of the speed goes out of the legs, but a lot more power comes into them and a lot more endurance.
Well, that actually, Phil, reminds me of a very interesting story about a man by the name of Alan van Eerden, one of the great South African cyclists of the 1980s. In fact, he was, I think he is still the only South African to have won a stage at the Giro d'Italia. He came back to train with me after the 3-week bike race here, and he complained at having very sore legs. He thought he'd got himself some kind of infection which gave him sore legs. I said, well, Van, I said, don't forget, it's the first time in your life you've ridden a 3-week bike race, and it was probably the first time in his career that he actually had sore legs.
He's still racing, and he's well over 40 years of age now, and he's still winning in South Africa, where he lives. He has a bicycle business in Johannesburg. Looking here at Fabio Sacchi, who is another man we see around the world. This year he won a stage of the Tour Down Under in Australia in January, and he came into that race as the big favourite to win it because he'd finished 3rd in the past and he gave it his best shot. He led the race for 3 days, but they finally took it off him before the finish and he didn't win. But even so, Fabio Sacchi is a really strong all-round bike rider, so consistent, not surprised in the least that his team captain Gilberto Simoni will be very content that Sacchi has joined this breakaway of 6 men. They're still only a shade under 2 minutes clear of the peloton, as we're now running towards the 30-kilometre banner. So there's Cipollini. He's going to have to whip up the team very shortly if he wants to have a go at the finish, as the field race now towards the end of stage 9. We'll take a short break. Now, Paul, the big shock, of course, is they haven't taken the world champion, Mario Cipollini, who's clearly on form.
Well, yeah, but I think the Society Tour de France are actually hedging their bets a little bit. They've only selected 21 teams. There are places for 22 teams. I think they're giving Jan Ullrich's team a chance to get their financial state sorted out, and they may well be brought in at the last minute. If they do not qualify, then maybe they will look at Mario Cipollini at the last moment. But you know the way Mario Cipollini is, he probably doesn't want to come in through the back door as a last-minute selection.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Bob, Mario was very unpleasant to the organisation at the start of the stage today, and he cannot understand how they can leave him out.
Well, I think that he's absolutely justified, and you cannot reduce the competitive imperative of an event without reducing the competition. And when you leave out the best athletes like Ullrich and Cipollini, in the long run, you actually do damage to the event itself. And I think the Tour de France is on the wrong road in this selection.
Okay, but as I say, there is still the chance that he can come in, because there's no certainty at all that Jan Ullrich's team will be in this tour yet. So I think this will unfold in the next 7 days or so. Okay, let's get back to the race today. Cipollini still in the mix. Let's go back to the action. Yes, indeed he is. The clock is counting at the moment on the 30 kilometres to go banner. The 6 leaders are under it, the riders approaching it. The last time check we had was around a minute 50. I would expect to see it start to close down. Interesting to see the Factor boys now have come to the front, this Danish team. I think that's because Magnus Bagstedt showed us yesterday, Paul, he's getting his old sprinting legs back for the finishes.
Very motivated by the performance of Magnus Bagstedt, who was fourth in that stage yesterday against Mario Cipollini. He's moved himself up into fourth place in the overall position of the Inter-Giro as well. And look at that time gap at 30 kilometres to go, 56 seconds. I think also, Phil, what has motivated Team Factor is a lot of their sponsors have actually confirmed that they will support the team for next season because of the team's performance here at the Giro d'Italia. Because after all, Bob, if you go back and look at the videotapes of this year's Giro, we've seen a lot of the red and black jerseys on the front.
I think this is the only breakaway of substance that they've missed out on throughout the whole Giro, and Magnus Bagstedt is doing really good. He's right up there in the Inter-Giro competition. Fourth on the stage yesterday. He's threatened to win a stage, and he's going to keep going for it, even maybe a little bit heavier stage with hills, maybe not the big mountains, but a few hills to split up the group. You'll see Bagstedt up in the front there.
He also leads a rather strange classification, the Trofeo Fuga, the breakaway competition, and he leads that competition by a few points. It's a difficult one to actually monitor because riders are awarded points by a jury of commissaires, but I have to say we have seen an awful lot of Magnus Bagstedt on the attack. And Team Factor, I think, very content with our participation so far, and they've still got 2 weeks to go. The 6 leaders right now, I think, Phil, are starting to realise that the main field is hotting up the pace, and as you can see, Bruchegin on the back here, he's not doing a whole lot to the success of the breakaway because he actually wants it all to come back together, because his man Pataki has already got himself 3 stage wins, and he's got to be one of the big favourites if the whole of the main field come together before the finishing line.
The stats there on Bruchegin. He's the rider on the right of our picture here. Ridden the Tour on 4 occasions now. This is his 4th time, so he knows all about the Giro d'Italia, and he's sharing a bottle here with a rival, Thomas Brogina. Brogina, though, knows the Italians as well as anybody, even though on this occasion he's on a new team now, a member of the CCC Polsat team, which is the first Polish team ever to take part in a national tour, and they've been pretty impressive so far. Now the peloton have got their act together now. They are charging now as we get down to about 27 kilometres from the finish. That gap came down dramatically at 30 kilometres from a minute 55 to just 56 seconds. And so I think those 6 riders up front for sure are going to be in big trouble in the next couple of kilometres. Just look at the speed of the peloton now as they well, the teams are riding hard. They're not hoping to bring Cipollini up for another sprint win, of course, because they've all got their own big sprinters down there. And Pataki is looking to keep that pink jersey as the most consistent daily finisher. He was 3rd yesterday. He's had 3 stage wins, and he leads this race on the points section. The points section is always seen as the number 2 competition in any big national tour. The other competition is the King of the Mountains, and along with the race on time, those are the main jerseys in any national tour. So as we see the field coursing through the trees down there, the gap is continuing to come down. Now nip off and get past in this race, and that's all thanks to Captain Morgan. Trivia. as we're now looking at the peloton. The banner in the distance there is 25 kilometres to go. And just look how quickly they've shut that down. I can't believe they've come back that fast, Bob.
It's incredible that they took a minute out of them in 5 kilometer stretch just before 30 Ks to go. And now every time the road straightens out, they'll see the breakaway just up the road. They'll know exactly the effort required to take it back. And it looks like these riders have surrendered to the whims of the peloton. The roads of the Giro are cruel indeed. These riders put a lot of effort into that breakaway, and it's all going to come for naught. Only 32-second lead, and it looks like they've pulled the plug and given up the ghost.
Well, Saki there checking the time of exactly when we shall get to the finish, and I think we'll get to the finish a little bit ahead of schedule, probably just towards the top of the hour right now. They really nailed that back between 35 kilometres and 25 kilometres. They pull themselves back 1.5 minutes. The main field now, you can see just bunching across the road. That indicates they know they've caught their prey. They're just slowing down slightly. They'll try and gather their forces once again at the front end of the main field. Once the main field had got to within 30 seconds, the leading group of 6 definitely put up the white flag of surrender, and now other riders will be thinking about the possibility of sneaking away before we get to the finish. 25 kilometres to go, and at these speeds that shouldn't take them very much more, Phil, than just outside of half an hour.
Yeah, or maybe even less than that now as they come together. 24k to left to right, just inside 15, well, just probably exactly 15 kilometres they've been, 15 miles rather, they've been caught from the finishing line. Good approach. We'll get a little look at the finishing line today, Paul, as we go out on that small circuit.
Well, it's interesting because they come into town, they cross the finishing line and face a 6.3 kilometre circuit, and these circuits in town are always very precarious, always very dangerous and difficult to control. But also, I think what is difficult today is in the final 1.5 kilometres, there is a long stretch of 1.2 kilometres and then almost a hairpin bend towards the end, coming back on yourselves towards the right, and then the finishing line curves off towards the left for the last 100 metres or so. But riders, Bob, I think in this day and age of modern cycling are always a bit wary when it comes to a city centre circuit finish.
Yes, the cars are parked there and garbage bins are out in the road and the fans are going crazy, especially here in Toscana. We've seen huge crowds today. Beautiful day for a bike race. 6 kilometres is pretty short for a circuit around the centre of town. Monte Catini, a beautiful thermal bath, a resort spa for a lot of the Italians. They come down to soak up the warm vapors in the thermal caves of Monte Catini, and the riders will be enjoying a little bit of that this evening, maybe give a little bit of repose to their tired legs after a lot of days of racing, very fast stages, and one big, huge mountaintop finish that has cleared up the GC battle.
And as well, Phil, all of the sprinters will try and do their very best on today's stage, because they certainly shouldn't get a chance tomorrow. Tomorrow, I think, is the day when we should see a very interesting breakaway, because there is hardly an ounce of flat on the course tomorrow. It is up and down all the way as we kind of cross right across the Apennines as we get down towards the plains which are around the outsides of Venice. Then we can have another flat stage for the riders on stage 11, but tomorrow is going to be another very tough day in the saddle for these men.
Yes, I think more a day for a breakaway to succeed tomorrow, and we haven't had any of those yet, apart from the uphill finish, of course. And Magnus Backstedt has made it quite clear that that's the race stage you go looking for tomorrow, so don't be surprised if he's in any early breakaway. Looking down though, and remember this little tricky finish, for my money, Bob, Cipollini doesn't like these small circuits and tends to miss out, makes mistakes on them.
380 meters or around about to the finish line from the last corner. It gives the riders with a more powerful jump a little bit.
I don't know if you saw that, Bob. You're good at Italian, but that was not a very nice remark about Jean-Marie Leblanc leaving out the world champion from the Tour de France.
I believe they've used the French for it. Leblanc, you're crazy.
Leblanc est fou. Definitely, they're not very happy with exclusion of the world champion Mario Cipollini from the selection of the Society Tour de France. But who knows, he may well get a chance in the final selection, because I feel in the back of my mind they will notch that up to 22 teams, and I think they're just hedging their bets, Phil, to try and see exactly what is going to happen over the next month or so. But I feel it is rather a shame not to bring Mario Cipollini to the Tour de France. Even if the mountains come very early in this year's event, you still get the razzmatazz and glory of a Super Mario, who is equally as popular as in France as he is in Italy.
Yes, he is. But, you know, this is a hilly tour very quickly this year, the 100th Tour, and therefore Jean-Marie Leblanc doesn't want to see a rider like Cipollini come in for 2 days and then leave the race and leave him without a man in the field for the next 2.5 weeks, and he feels that maybe that's why he shouldn't invite Mario Cipollini. I don't think the rest of the cycling world will agree with Jean-Marie on this, but he's proven in the past he's a hard man, and he has been responsible for the great success of the Tour de France. He's very proud of his race, and he's also shown quite a leaning as well towards the French teams, because he's very conscious of the precarious French balance professional cycling has there, and the teams left out of the Tour usually means the death knell, because the team then usually folds up. And so that's probably the reason he's taken Jean de la Tour. The other big miss-out team is Phonak, because only yesterday with Juan Carlos Dominguez they won the Tour of Picardy. And I thought that might have been enough to have got them their place in the Tour, but not so. Anyway, we're looking here at Julio Perez, last year's King of the Mountains, this year hoping for a high finish. He's got plenty of time, and it won't be today when he progresses. We'll take a break. Join us shortly.
Bike races are won and lost in the mountains, and I was an absolutely pitiful climber. In the Giro one time, a little lady passed me on the way home with a loaf of bread. But since I've retired, I have found the secret to great climbing. It is amazingly simple. I think I'll do some climbing clinics. I hear there's some good money in that.
This June, OLM will take you to this country's best beaches and take you on some of the coolest adventures both on and off the sand. And there's a twist. We'll have some fun with unsuspecting beachgoers as we see what they'll do for $100. Catch Beach Ambush, premiering June the 1st at 9:30 p.m. only on OLM. And welcome back. We're looking at Paolo Lanfranchi here. He's just stopped with a front wheel puncture. He got a quick wheel change. He's making his way back through the cars. The peloton basically all together. I just better apologise to David Miller, because I mentioned that Juan Carlos Dominguez won the Tour of Picardy yesterday. What I should have said, he won the last time trial and lost the race by 2 seconds to the British rider David Miller, who's in the Tour de France. And it's nice to see him winning, Paul, after that nasty accident he had in March.
Well, yeah, it was a very dramatic crash, and a lot of people thought he wouldn't get himself back on track for the Tour de France, but I think with that time trial performance, he actually finished second to Dominguez, but he won the bike race by 2 seconds, and that, I think, will give an indication that he's on track now for the Tour de France, and we'll be looking to try and rival Lance Armstrong in the opening prologue time trial. Christian Moreni on the far side there for Alessio, and Paolo Lanfranchi at the back end of the bike race at the moment, and it's always difficult in the last 20 kilometres to get yourself back onto the tail of the peloton. And because of Lanfranchi's lowly position in the overall classification, Bob, nobody's stopping to help him.
It looks like a breakaway here going off the front while Lanfranchi tries to close the gap back to the peloton. He won a stage in the Giro d'Italia a few years ago, and he's a great little bike racer, a stalwart of the MAPE program. He's now on the smaller Panadia team, but he's having a pretty decent season, and he was good down in the Tour of Langkawi, won by Tom Danielson from Durango, Colorado. Hi, Tom. Hi, Durango. And here's some beautiful shots of the Giro. Another one of the Colombian Solitario riders off the front of the bike race.
Well, this is in fact the Italian on that squad, De Luca De Angeli. He's taken a flyer off the front end of the main field, trying to surprise the sprinters, but I think they've got themselves organised right now. There are several teams on the front end of the peloton. A lot of the riders from Lotto Domo, Phil, have been very noticeable. This is the sort of finish that Robbie McEwen likes, because it's a ducking and diving finish. Lots of corners around the urban circuit of 6.3 kilometres, and as we can see, the Solitario rider didn't get that much of an advantage. And I think we'll get a chance to see how he leapt out of the pack here, and everybody actually, Bob, just looked the other way, didn't want to chase him.
Well, they knew that the tempo is too great in the peloton, and there's a lone rider, almost impossible to stay away from the group. We don't see many attacks in the closing kilometers that succeed anymore. We used to see once in a while a great pursuiter like Ekimov from the Postal team get a little bit of a gap in the closing kilometers and have enough power to stay away to the finish. But the sprinters teams nowadays way too organized, and you have the whole train on the front of the peloton going so incredibly fast.
Well, when you think the sprinters teams are dragging the peloton along, Phil, at 60 kilometres an hour, you've got to be a man capable of sustaining 65 kilometres an hour to succeed, and there are not many men in the main field able to do that. But Yaroslav Ekimov is a man who did it successfully in the past, and very well could do it in the future, because he's still riding his bike, and came up this year with a very fabulous performance, Phil, in Paris-Roubaix.
I'm sure he'll be back in the Tour de France, because Lance Armstrong rates him very highly and will treasure his assistance as he makes his bid, of course, to win the Tour de France for the 5th time. And need I remind you, we'll bring you live action every day from France as that race gets underway throughout the month of July. We're looking though now at the closing 20 kilometres of today's stage of the Giro d'Italia, Italy's national tour. And I think at this stage of the race, anybody that tries to get off front is doing it purely for publicity, because you'll never hold a race doing 60 kilometres an hour.
Impossible. 15 kilometres to go, inside of 10 miles right now, the whole of the main field together. It's interesting to note, isn't it, Bob, Formaggio Pinzoli are very active on the front end of the main field this afternoon. They've always had several riders in there. They obviously feel that Moreno Di Biasi's got a very good chance of getting himself a stage victory. He already leads one competition in the Giro this year. That is the Intergiro competition. That's the light blue jersey, if you get a chance of seeing him. But I think this afternoon, the team who will be trying to get themselves a serious organisation towards the end is the team of Robbie McEwen, because McEwen has already announced he will not go much further than the 13th stage of this event.
I'm most certain that Robbie would like to get another stage win. He had one taken away when he moved over to the barriers against Fabio Baldato of the Alessio team. He was awarded the victory. I think that even though McEwen won another stage in the meantime, he'd love to get another one. They also have a fast man on Alessio Baldato's teammate, Angelo Furlan, and you can see a lot of the Alessio riders from that team on the front of the bike race. But Lotto, I think, wants to give a stage that's perhaps best suited to Robbie McEwen of all of our sprinters. A little bit faster, not as powerful as Cipollini or Pataki, but he is a little bit quicker, and that turn so close to the finish line might give him just what he needs to get a jump over those guys and come up with the win.
Another team organising themselves at the front there, Phil, is a team that Bob has been talking an awful lot about with me over the last couple of days. Alessio are trying to look after Angelo Furlan, who really hasn't showed the class that he's got when it comes to sprinting. When we saw him in the Tour of Spain, we thought he was going to be the next sprinter on the block. You can see this is the Alessio team. They've got a good man with a win under his belt already, Baldato, as the leader of the team. Cacchioli, who we expected to ride high in the overall classification. Wearing number 3, Furlan, is a very good sprinter. And in fact, the last two men in the team there, 8 and 9, Noe and Pelizzotti, both of them riding very high in the overall classification, ahead of the man who at the start of the race was expected to be the leader, Cacchioli.
And he still might climb his way back into the race, but there's a fair bit of work to do at the moment. But the team is having a reasonable amount of success, and Andrea Noe could well be their high finisher in Milan. There he is, down there at the moment, 3rd overall, and 54 seconds off the race lead. He's not going to recover that lost time today. The bunch are going to probably come in together. They'll have to pay attention, make sure they're not split time today. Tricky old finish on this small circuit. And remember that the winner of the day always gets a 20-second win bonus, and that comes off his overall race time.
Nice of them to show Andrea Noe just as we began speaking about him.
That's very pleasant of them, Bob.
Quite lovely, and it's wonderful to see the Italians cooperating so well. On the front, the Vini Caldirola team trying to keep Stefano Garzelli out of trouble. They've been tailing riders off if there's a gap in the peloton. So this is why these finishes are so tricky, so dangerous. The sprinters team want to be in the front, and the climbers teams want to be in the front. The climbers, like Simoni and Garzelli, maybe not as adept at the bike handling skills through the turns when it gets furious, and all the sprinters coming to the fore there. You can see Garzelli in the pink jersey up to the left of the screen there, right on the shoulder of his teammates, and they're doing a big tempo to keep him out of trouble in the finale of this bike race.
I think what's important to note is what you actually told us about earlier, Bob, the fact that Garzelli and Simoni are the best riders. They are basically climbers and contenders for the overall classification, but they are the best 2 riders, Phil, of the overall contenders when it comes to riding near the front of the pack on these very dangerous charges to the line. And so far, only Simoni has lost a small amount of time to Garzelli, but the rest of these riders, they've lost themselves almost 30 seconds so far in crazy little splits towards the end.
And it's quite ridiculous when these boys can't be given a single second. They're so good, Simoni and Garzelli. Lots of support here for Adriano, as there has been since the race started down in the far south of Italy. As we look at the peloton now, they are 12 kilometres from the line just now. That's 7 miles of racing, but of course you will see the finishing line as we go through there in about 6 kilometres time, as they go out on 1 lap of the town. And as by definition these laps tend to be rather twisty and quite dangerous, and for that reason we think we should watch out for the battling Australian Graham Brown and his fellow Queenslander there, well, his fellow Australian but not in the same state, Robbie McEwen. So the field here in a long thin line, the riders at the back just glad to see the finish, while the men at the front driven on by the team of the pink jersey leader Garzelli, Sidemak, Vini Calderola. They're setting the pace at the moment. The crowd enjoying the sight. We'll take a very short break. Rejoin us quickly as the bunch head towards the finish. Looking at Leo Adriano here, who's just got away from the peloton as we've gone under the 10-kilometre banner. Lots of support for this rider, even though he's a man of the south. He seems to be well liked here in the middle of Italy as well. But I can tell you that moments ago there was a small fall in the peloton, and Galvez, the Kelme sprinter, is one of the riders now racing behind the peloton, and at these sort of speeds it's unlikely he's going to get on, and that's before we start the finishing circuit.
This is how it happened, Phil. Just moments ago they came round a left-hand corner and it caused an awful lot of confusion. There is Galvez, the Kelme rider, immediately trying to get himself back into action, not even waiting for the team mechanic to come up alongside, on the bike and riding again. But at these speeds, as you say, Phil, 60 kilometers an hour around the finishing circuit here, it is so difficult to get yourself back into the main peloton. We are actually on the finishing circuit for the moment, but still to go across the finishing line for the first time, and when we do that we'll be 6.3 kilometers to go to the finish. This is the leader, Elio Adriano, and he's been very aggressive, Bob, hasn't he, over these last few stages, looking for the breakaway. But to try and slip away at speeds like this on an urban finishing circuit is almost impossible to do by a single man.
It's virtually impossible, and right when he turned his head there, he saw the whole peloton charging down the road. On these circuits, everyone in the whole peloton wants to be in the front. You can't maintain that type of speed by yourself in the front, and now it's the Saeco riders doing a little bit of tempo, just enough to keep Simoni out of trouble. They don't have a sprinter per se, and you can see just how dangerous it is when you're on a wide highway and you come right down to a very narrow road in the corners. Your legs are a little bit tired, and it's so painful at this end of the peloton, while in the front they're flying down the road. The Saeco train keeping Simoni out of trouble at this point at the front of the race.
Well, Phil, this is the closing kilometres of the circuit, so the riders getting a chance to see exactly how it's going to unfold. There, in fact, you can see riders who were involved in that crash. They have gone out of the back of the group, and we get a chance later, Bob, to see if any of the big names, but one of Mario Cipollini's top men is missing from the line there.
That looked like Alberto Ongarato, and it must have been that crash very close to the front of the bike race. He's one of his big lead-out men, taking over from about 2Ks out down to about 1,500 meters or 1 kilometer to go when Benatti and Lombardi take over. But that crash must have been right at the front of the peloton, because Galvez was involved, as well as Mario Cipollini's main lead-out man, Ongarato of the Domina Vacanze team.
Well, just on a kilometre now, we're going to pass under the banner. We should see the red flame, actually. There it is. So it's 1 kilometre to go to the line now. And we've seen a lot of riders now are riding in. They sat up at the back, and this, as we've said before, is not a favourite type of finish for Cipollini, because he can't organise his team.
Well, watch out for this, because we actually get a dress rehearsal of this very nasty corner which comes in just around about 300 metres to go. There's the 500 metre to go banner. These riders are all over the road right now, and in a very short while they should be taking that fairly nasty right-hander, and here it is. We'll get a chance just to see it slightly uphill into the corner, but just look at this. This is something that Mario Cipollini does not like inside the last kilometre.
Sharp right. They're taking it nice and gently at this moment, but there it is. It's a very tight turn off that barrier. I think that's where I might have stood today if I was watching the finish of this race, because then you line up at 350 metres for the finish. Nothing wrong with the finishing straight, nice and wide, but you're going to have to be in the first 6 or 7 men off that corner. And now there's an attack here by Kurt Arvidsson of Norway. He's taken his chance, inspired perhaps. He's a rider who is trying to find a result for the boys, and he's gone on his way. He's the leader of the Factor team this time out. It's his first Giro d'Italia. But they do make an impression, because Danish television gives the Giro a lot of coverage because they like their cycling, but they like to see their riders succeed as well.
Well, they certainly do, and that man we were looking at leading the main field through the finish line has succeeded in the past, because in fact he was an under-23 world champion, and I think that was in fact in San Sebastian. We're on the final lap right now, 6.3 kilometres to go, and Bob, a very sketchy circuit.
Unbelievably dangerous to put these riders through here, the whole peloton. Hopefully the streets will straighten out a little bit and be a reasonable finishing area. And the sprinters teams now starting to get organized at the front. Arvidsson off the front, the Norwegian champion and former world champion, and Ultimo Giro, last lap. and hopefully it's not the last time we'll see Mario Cipollini at the front of the bike race.
Well, it won't be the last time, because Mario Cipollini there, to my eyes, in about 5th or 6th position. The world champion happily there on the tail of his two teammates who are moving to the front end of the peloton. They brought Arvidsson back into the fold. One or two Lotto Domo riders moving in. The man we said we hadn't seen, Nick Gates, is there at the front end of the pack. Hand going up there for Cipollini's team, so I wonder if there's a problem, Bob.
It's Benati who's put his hand up, and I don't for the life of me know why, unless it's to call the lads to the front, Bob.
I hope it's to call the lads to the front, and not that Benati has a flat tire, because that would be really difficult for the lead-out train of Domina Vacanze. If their rider had a flat tire, Benati has been doing the 1 kilometer to about 300 kilometers to go, 400 kilometers to go, and that's when Lombardi has been taken over. But we don't see all the Domina Vacanze riders at the front of the peloton right now, so close to the finish.
That looks like Denny Lungi, who's just been put in an attack here for Alessio, just gone off the front of the group. Well, they're not giving anybody an easy ride to the finish on this circuit. One-on-one, they're launching an attack.
Well, we saw Denny Lungi last year win a stage very similar to this one in the Giro with a short circuit into town. That one did, however, feature a huge climb, so the sprinters teams were nowhere near the front, and Lungi now trying to get a little bit of an advantage, but it's going to be very hard to stay away. What it will do, take the pressure off the Alessio team, and they can set it up for Furlan.
Well, there goes the man on the attack. Lungi it is, as he tries to hold off the field here now as they come into the streets. There's the details for you. The great Eddie Merckx won here twice, and the great and late as of last week, Rick van Steenbergen won here in 1957. So the attack is on now. They're trying to sort this one out. This is an opportunist move, and he did it before, as Bob said, Lungi, on a circuit out on the course.
In fact, as we speak, he's back in the fold.
Back in the bunch, is he?
He got about 2 meters 50 off the front end of the main field, and almost immediately it was the team of Domina Vacanze just turned up the screws slightly, and then the next minute the man in the red and black jersey of Alessio was back halfway down the peloton. It is always dangerous on a finishing circuit like this to try and stay at the front end of the peloton, and this is where really, and I had to tell you one thing, the man there from CCC Polsat, Bob, now he's really trying to make a few enemies, because he's always barging to try and stay in position and stay on the back wheel of Mario Cipollini.
Yes, absolutely. Tries to get on Cipollini's wheel day after day, and Mario won't be liking that too much at all. And you can see him trying again now to get right back in there. He'll try to come over onto the train, and I wouldn't want to be trying to get the wheel of any of Cipollini's teammates. He just puts his shoulders right through there, and he's looking very fierce today, not surrendering his wheel at all. And look at the sprint leader, Pataki, having a big problem with Nalduz, and he's leading now. It's a very sketchy sprint here. And there's another Alessio rider coming up. Oh,
that was nasty. Ness is getting a little bit nasty right now, and the judges will look at that. That is throwing a punch by Nalduz. He's not going to get himself a very many points there, Phil, the Latvian rider from CCC Polsat. That was a serious punch to the head of Alessandro Pataki.
Well, I'm sure that'll be analysed later on, but if he starts doing that, there's only one rule in professional cycling, that is immediate disqualification from the race, if that was deemed to be an intentional punch. Now, Pataki and Nalduz are really getting a little bit rough here now as they fight for the wheel of the one man who has the finish in his destiny, Mario Cipollini. Robbie McEwen has got there on the right shoulder. Now this is going to be some sprint. The three top sprinters are together, and the man who normally is prone to throwing the odd punch, Graham Brown, not in sight yet.
Well, Graham Brown was actually just moving up round the outside there in the orange jersey of Panaria. The funny thing about Mario Cipollini, he will say, I don't know what goes on behind me. Look at this, Robbie McEwen now has decided he wants to get in there with Angelo Furlan.
Indeed, that was Furlan is also coming now. We don't often see a scrap like this, but we've got 4 or 5 of the best sprinters in the world, Bob, have found the same location in the peloton. Have you ever seen men scrabble to get on the back wheel of the world champion?
Well, Pataki's just come back into the picture now, trying to get back on the Cipollini's wheel. What's wrong there is he doesn't have any teammates to help him stay out of the wind. He has to move up by himself. The Francais de Joux team moving up nicely on the outside to protect Eisel's chances in the sprint, or perhaps Jimmy Casper. This is sketchy. This is a great sprint. It is all-out war today into Monte Catini Terme.
Well, it looks like McEwen's got himself further up the line there right now, dropping himself into 3rd slot. Cipollini down into 5th place. Nalduz has got his wheel right now, but there's been some serious battling going on for the wheel of Mario Cipollini. This is why, to me, Phil, Mario Cipollini is so brilliant. He just does his own sprint, and everybody else wants to use him as a launch pad to victory. Somebody has tried to take a sneaky move off the front.
Somebody has gone for it. A Francais de Joux rider here. Wouldn't surprise me if it's Carlos. Let's have a look if we get his number here as he comes up towards the light. It is indeed. It is Carlos de Cruz who's gone clear. And De Cruz, well, he's not the great sprinter, but he might hold them off here. He took advantage. He might well have seen the infighting that was going on. 4 top sprinters there just scrabbling to get onto the back wheel for the lead out by Mario Cipollini, so they could try and take him on the line. This man has managed to prise a gap open, and we're inside a kilometre.
Inside the last kilometre right now, and it's around about 450 metres to the right-hand turn, and it's going to be absolute chaos going into that turn right now. They've caught Carlos De Cruz. He's back in the fold. Cipollini up into 4th place. He's got 3 of his teammates in front. There is Pataki, Robbie McEwen, Graham Brown. They're all there. There's still a lot of nudging and barging of shoulders. Cipollini wants to get round this corner in the first 4 positions if he can. The team are doing an absolutely superb job. This is the roller coaster right now, Phil. They will climb up here. Cipollini still in good position. Robbie McEwen, I know, is looking for this corner, but Cipollini, I think, may well have got this one sorted out. He's round that final corner in 3rd place.
Well, he's got the perfect lead out again, as now number 2 on the wheel there is Lombardi. There's Nasdaq's gone down. He's crashed on the bend and been left there, and there's a whole queue of riders now waiting to get round the faller, but this is the sprint now. Now, can Lombardi give it him? Here he goes. Lombardi goes now. Cipollini still locked on his wheel, but watch out, McEwen's right there as well. Now, McEwen, is he going to take this away from Cipollini? I think he... Oh, I don't know. I really don't know, but Cipollini thinks he has just set the record for 42 stage wins in the Giro d'Italia.
Absolutely superb. There's a lot of barging. Cipollini had to keep his cool today. He needed to get the first win under his belt, and I think on the line there he knew that Robbie McEwen was not going to come by. McEwen had to come round a long way. But Bob, it's amazing to see Cipollini seems to go into unbelievable oxygen jet to get himself these wins now. He's getting pushed more than he's ever been pushed before, but now he is the outright record holder. Absolutely superb.
Well, you can see the trouble he's in right now. Can hardly catch his breath to talk to the reporters. He needs to sit down and take a rest. Absolutely asphyxiated on the line there. A huge effort by Cipollini to break the record, and that's how it should be. It should be very difficult to break something like that. We saw him go through all kinds of torture in the first week to get into form. He came onto form yesterday, tied the record, and today he went right into a real purgatory of cycling hell to get that last win to set the record. Look at the replay here going around the final corner.
Well, Lombardi again as the last lead-out man for Mario Cipollini. We'll wait now while the judges study the photograph. Down goes Nasdaq's, and that was his chances on the ground. We'll take a short break, come back, and we'll bring you up to date. In 2 days, Mario Cipollini has gone from, some would say a has-been, to the man who's now won more stages in a Giro d'Italia than anybody else. He now has 42, and in 2 days his 2nd stage win, because the camera says he's got the victory over Robbie McEwen of Australia and Alessandro Pataki. The same result, identical as yesterday. And my goodness me, this will go down as one of his best wins, because it was a rough old ride to the line.
Very rough ride to the line. Not the kind of finish that Mario Cipollini likes. I think he came into this sprint a lot more relaxed, Phil, because he's already then got himself a win under the belt. Because certainly he doesn't like the rough and tumble, but his team, once again, absolutely perfect. Look at this result.
Well, there we are. Mario Cipollini, what a time for 100 miles. 3 hours 41 minutes. Robbie McEwen 2nd. Pataki, Mirko Marini of Italy getting up there for 4th. In a strange result here, Daniele Bernati of Domina Vacanti hanging on. He's won the lead-out man. He's still finished in 5th place behind his team captain, Mario Cipollini. So this has been a great race so far today. All that shouldering that's going on in the sprint, though, I think we might get an official warning from the organisation. This is the shoulder-to-shoulder sprint, and it looks a lot clearer from the top, doesn't it? A clear win, in fact, for the world champion. It's been a dream 2 days for him. He equalled the record of Alfredo Binder yesterday. Today he's got his own record now of 42 wins, and I can't ever see anybody matching that throughout the remaining history of our great sport. So if you look out across this beautiful countryside here now, the prize presentation is being made ready. We'll show as much of it to you as we can. We're looking at the overall situation here. Garzelli 40 seconds ahead of Simoni, and Andre Noe at 54 seconds. I think there's a slight change in the overall classification there, and Pelazzotti is in 4th place. But I think, Bob, the judges are going to have something to say overnight about all that pushing and shoving.
Well, the riders so incredibly agile. They're going down the road 60, 65 kilometers an hour. They're so quick they can take their hands off the bars and start fist fighting. We saw Pataki do that to Naudux. The judges cannot stand for that because it's a very dangerous situation. You could create huge crashes. Beautiful replay of a monument in cycling right there. Mario Cipollini beating the record we thought would never be broken of Alfredo Binda. 42 stage wins in the Tour of Italy. Absolutely phenomenal.
Well, we've seen the stage result there. As we look at tomorrow's map here, a big undulating day tomorrow, not a Cipollini day at all, a possible day for a good escape that might see the greyhounds outwit the peloton as we go down to Faenza. But I can tell you that gap has opened up by 9 seconds between Garzelli and Gilberto Simoni, which indicates that again they have split time the peloton. So we'll get to catch all that tomorrow, of course. We explain it to you. Stage 10 will come to you live at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Our prime time show, as always, 8 p.m. Eastern Time and Pacific Time. The Tour of Italy is really hotting up today. I wonder what the organisers of the Tour de France think of that, now that the world champions won 2 stages straight and they didn't select him for their race in July. There's our website address. Keep up to date with us there, olntv.com. Come and visit us and come and read the pieces, especially by Bob Roll and Paul Sherwen. Well, there we are. The win today, Mario Cipollini. It'll be different tomorrow. Hope you're enjoying the coverage. Bob Roll, Paul Sherwen, I'm Phil Liggett saying we'll see you at 9:30 tomorrow. Goodbye.
Ejected from the race and given a 12-month ban. He returned to competition just days before this year's race, looking for a way to prove the innocence he claimed last year. Leaping out of the pack on the slopes of Terme Luigiani reminded us of the form that Garzelli had last year, but for Stefano it was a statement to all the disbelievers, but he was and is a true champion.
Well, Garzelli trying to wipe away those bad memories of a year ago by riding pretty well at the moment. We're in the town down the bottom here. We're coming off the climb now. We've actually dropped down some 300 metres since the top of the mountain. We're now heading into the finishing town, Avezzano. We'll get a good look at the finish, and then that will leave us a 38-kilometre circuit, more or less plateaued out at around about 600 metres now, as Zabala brings through the leaders. And as I say, Christian Moreni, best placed in this group. He's 1 minute and 23 seconds behind Pataki. Well, with a lead now 3 minutes 40, that puts him 2 minutes and 17 seconds to the good. And of course, they get a win bonus of 20 seconds, Bob.
Yes, 20 seconds for the win. So if it comes back together, it won't be a problem for Pataki to keep his jersey, assuming he doesn't get dropped. That's probably the sketchiest feed I've seen in a very long time.
That's
Dead
an extra
flat road. That's 40 Ks to go, 38 Ks to go, and I guarantee you the peloton is going to come raging through there. And one thing we did see before the finale, a couple of pretty hard corners there, so it might be a bit of a tricky sprint.
Well, let me just explain that quickly, Bob. The riders have come in and crossed the finishing line, but that's not the way they will actually finish, because they come from straight on. The final 600 metres are straight, and it's a left-hand bend into the finishing circuit, and there they took a right-hander. They're out now on the 38-kilometre route out into the country. And this feed, by the way, that you're talking about, in fact, it's Moreni at the back there just dropping his bottle. It was sort of an illicit feed organised by some very well-organised bike racing teams there. They knew they had an opportunity to hand up bottles, and they take every possibility they can to ease the pressure on the riders having to go back to the cars to keep themselves topped up, Phil.
Yes, the original feed was out on the course. By feed, we talk about where the riders pass through at high speed and snatch these little bags full of food and keep on going. And if you do what Moreni did and drop them, then you're in big trouble, because, of course, you're going to go hungry, or in Moreni's case, probably thirsty for the last 24 miles of today's stage. The clock is counting down. The leaders have passed through the finishing line, but as Paul has said, they've got a loop now before they come back to contest the actual finish of the race. We'll give you the up-to-date gap when we come back after this break.
Come il Giro d'Italia e soprattutto tradizione. L'uomo che sa tutto è naturalmente il vecchio Popchi.
Binda ha vinto la sua 60ª tappa nel Giro. Proprio qui!
La tradizione sì, d'accordo, ma anche la corsa è grande.
Decision on, it's a build-up.
Outright wins in the Giro d'Italia, an absolutely phenomenal accomplishment and another monument in the history of cycling.
Yeah, well, Cipollini, as I say, can have a bit of a rest day today. Amongst another rider not to start in the 162-man field that made the start, Daniel Contrini didn't come out to play today, so he's gone as well. The man who leads the race is still Stefano Garzelli. You may remember we had different time gaps when we left our programme yesterday. Well, that's because the transponders on the bikes showed Simone coming in late, involved in that crash, but they applied the rule. You get the same time as the winner in the last kilometre, so there is now no change overall in effect. So Simone is now back to that 31-second deficit. We said 40 last night. Noe is also there in third place. Pelazzotti, Sabaliauskas in fifth. Further down the list, no change at all because all of the main field coming in same time as the winner yesterday, Cipollini, and Tocznik there riding well, the Austrian in ninth. Of our notables, Casagrande 11th, but over 3 minutes back. Perez is lying in 12th, and Aitor Gonzalez in the race, but with no chance of winning after you lost 7 minutes in the first 9 days of cycling. But today is a difficult day. There was a little bit of light rain as the riders rolled away at the start. I can tell you they've got off to a very quick start. There is a breakaway. Paul, we expected that on a course like this.
Well, yes, Phil, I've got to tell you, it is a very difficult race route today, going right across the centre of Italy through the Apennines, and there's hardly one flat kilometre of today's stage. Let's just take a look at where the riders go today. Well, they leave where they finished yesterday, Montecatini Terme, all the way to Faenza. It's a ride of 202 kilometres, but let's have a little bit of a look at the profile because it is unbelievable. Have a look at this. The first col coming after 50 kilometres, then another one, and then towards the end, those succession of climbs should really split up the field.
And we can now pick up the action here, thank you Paul, as we look down. A breakaway of 16 men establishing itself before all of the climbing began today. They were clear at the Intergiro sprint at 57 kilometres. The latest time check we have is just over 3 minutes on the peloton. And they are averaging in excess of 40 kilometres. That's the situation. Well, in addition to Contrini not starting this morning, you can now add the abandon of Brett Lancaster of Australia and Panera. He stopped at the feeding zone, and so we now have 161 riders left, and 13 of those 19 teams with still all 9 men. Well, I'll quickly update you now with as we look here at the work being done by the pink jersey team of Vini Calderola. Just to limit the escape, I'll give you the full lineup of those 16 men very quickly. Constantino Zabala in Kelme, Kurt Averson of Fatka, Dario Cioni of Fasabortolo, Freddy Gonzalez, the lead in the King of the Mountains, Sella Italia, Paolo Tirolongo of Paneria, Leonardo Bertognoli, Denis Lungi, Ruslan Grishenko of Lambau Credit, Giuseppe Miraglia for Maggi, Francisco Via Lampre, Volodya Beleka of Lambau, Rafael Iliano, Sella Italia, Matteo Carrera of Denardi, Ronnie Schultz of Gerolsteiner, Rinaldo Nocentini of Maggi, and making up the 16, Marzio Brusegin of the Fasabortolo. That's the lineup, and these boys are going to have to do something about that. We'll take our first break. And welcome back. Just as we approach the top of the climb here, the Col Albano, and it looks as though Freddy Gonzalez in this leading group has got maximum points, which will help him. He won the previous climb as well, so he's hanging on to his lead in the King of the Mountains. Still being challenged though by Constantino Zabaya, who is in this breakaway and riding very well himself, but he's having to play second fiddle at the moment to the King of the Mountains leader, Freddy Gonzalez. Looking down there on the peloton, well, we went through the Intergiro sprint very early on today after just 57 kilometres. The breakaway was clear, and Zabaya showing us he can be a sprinter as well as a climber, taking it out ahead of the champion of Norway, Kurt Arveson, and Dario Cioni there for Fasabortolo in third place. So I don't think there'll be a change in that competition. Moreno Di Biasi is still the leader in that competition, but at the moment he's a captive of the peloton. Here the peloton boys, and the boy in pink is going to have to keep the pressure on here.
He's going to have a very hard day in the saddle today. This is a difficult difficult course. As we said earlier, Phil, there's absolutely no flat, no respite at all, and his team will have to keep an awful lot of pressure on. That leading group is approaching the 4-minute mark at the moment. We've got a time check running right now, as you can see the clock ticking away in the right-hand corner. But there's a young man in this breakaway called Leonardo Bertagnoli. He's actually only a second-year professional. He's never won a bike race in his career, but he actually, Phil, started the day in 16th position in the overall classification, 4 minutes 19 behind, and he's a member of the all-powerful Seiko squad, which is the best team in the classification so far, and of course the team of Gilberto Simoni.
A young Bob Roll in the making there, Bob.
Well, I would have loved a course like this if I wasn't too tired. It's what they call in Italy pesante, a very heavy-duty course. Lots of very narrow roads, all of them winding and twisting around the central part of the Apennine Mountains, and an incredible amount of hills throughout the course. There's 4 King of the Mountains, Cassalia, Carnevale Albano, and the final one to the Trebbio. It's a very difficult climb, quite steep and very torturous descent. But in between the categorized climb, there's another 4 or 5 really hard hills that they haven't bothered to put a category on. And here's the leaders, Grushenko there going off the road almost. You can see how narrow these are. And it hasn't been very long that they have been paved. So they're very tortuous roads, and it's a heavy-duty stage of the Giro today. The GC men will have their work cut out for them, and we'll have to see if they can recover in the next couple of days before we get into the big mountains. But this is a brutal stage today.
Well, actually, just before the Trebbio, there's a very difficult climb, Bob, as you mentioned, called the Monte Casale. That isn't even categorized at all, and a lot of people think that's even tougher than the Trebbio. The difficult thing, Phil, about the Trebbio is, in fact, it is a very narrow climb, and the descent is quite treacherous. Although the weather conditions for the moment look absolutely superb, there is a threat of thunderstorms or rain clouds coming in the latter part of the afternoon, and if that does happen, you can be almost certain that the main field will completely split on the descent of that final climb of the day.
Well, it was a little bit damp at the start. There's the weather for you. 80 degrees Fahrenheit, extremely nice conditions, but we keep going up and down the mountains, back to the peloton as we come up to the top of the Colle Albano, and it's just under 3 minutes. So they are closing in, Bob. The pressure is very much on, but they are flying. There's confirmation of Gonzalez, Sabaya getting his second spot there, which was very interesting. And was that Lanfranchi in third place?
It looked like it might have been the Panaria.
Well, I haven't seen him in the break.
Tirolongo.
I think that's a mistake. I think, in fact,
We believe that's Tirolongo.
we believe it's Tirolongo, yeah.
256, the Vini Caldirola team doing all kinds of work on the peloton, really struggling, and that acceleration that they put in to close the gap down to the breakaway actually split a lot of riders off of the main field. So it's a very difficult stage today. This is the days when the domestiques really earn their pay for their team leaders. You can see the yellow jerseys of Stefano Garzelli, all on the front of the bike race, doing a tremendous amount of work today. 16 riders is a little bit unmanageable, even though the closest one, Bertagnoli, is only 4 minutes and 19 seconds behind. You've got to keep the pressure on. The race will start to split apart in the finale because of the natural accelerations towards the finish line. This is a great breakaway to be in, especially if you're sitting on. There's 2 Fossa riders, there's 2 Pinzola riders, and 2 Selle Italia Columbia riders. They can play the team game a little bit, and everyone else is doing a good ride. They're very well organized. All the teams represented practically, and a big day for the GC contenders chasing from behind.
And it looks there on the graphic coming in from Italy that it's all downhill to the finish. Well, I can assure you it isn't. But the Monte Trebbio is a very steep climb and a great springboard for this breakaway to split up on. But watch out, because there's a man up front today could take the race lead if it all works out. We'll take a break. July 5, only on OLN. Now back with the action here, and we're looking at the leaders in the breakaway. And I think I just caught a glimpse there of Paolo Lanfranchi, so he is in the breakaway. My apologies to the judges at the top of the Colle Albano, as Lanfranchi went over there in third place. So this breakaway, Bob, is keeping the race well up on schedule and causing a lot of pain, because Mario Cipollini and the majority of the sprinters are now many minutes behind the main pack.
Yes, they've already been dropped on the earlier climbs. It's a strange point system. These are all Category 2 climbs, the 4 that have been categorized. And there's only 5 points for the winner, 3 for second, and 1 point for third place. It doesn't seem to give enough credit based on the effort that these riders are putting in. The gaps come down now, the 2:45, a bit of desperation in the peloton as the Vini Caldirola riders try to limit the the losses to the breakaway as we get a little bit closer to Faenza where the finish is. Very hard stage today. The breakaway's been working really hard. You can see grouped around the pink jersey at the front of the peloton. That's the Vini Caldirola riders, excuse me. There's Stefano Garzelli in the pink jersey, our race leader. But this isn't even a categorized climb. It's not even on the profile. You can see how difficult it is. Bunched up in the front and a long line of riders being dropped off behind. It's quite a small group now left in the peloton, and they're really working hard to close the gap.
Well, it's all sweat and toil today. Even when there are no official prizes at the top for the King of the Mountains, the roads continue to roll nicely. Now, Paul, we've got 2 Paneria riders in the breakaway. As we see here, the manager of Sella Italia feed their man, Iliano. Paul, I think I'm right in saying that we're heading towards the home of the Paneria team, aren't we?
We are heading towards the home of the Paneria team, which is why it's rather sad to see the abandon of Brett Lancaster earlier on. We haven't seen an awful lot of Graham Brown in this Giro d'Italia either, a man we thought would be up battling with the sprints because he's got the nerve to mix it with riders as they were fighting yesterday. In fact, if we get a quick update, Daniele Contrini didn't start this morning, and Brett Lancaster, the Paneria rider, were abandoned after about 70 kilometres of racing. In fact, Faenza, the finishing town, Phil, is also famous in motor racing because it's the home of the Minardi team, and it's not too far away from the Imola racing circuit.
Oh, it all happens in Italy, doesn't it? What a beautiful country it is. They love their sport, particularly in this area, their cycling. At the start this morning, by the way, they presented Mario Cipollini with yesterday's signing-in sheet as a memento of his 42nd stage win, which he took graciously. And all of his team arrived at the start in T-shirts with the big figures 42 on them. And so it was a lovely atmosphere down at the start today. But it's all action now, and Cipollini just happy to ride along behind the main field, only concerned with beating the time limit, riding in what we always call the autobus, Bob.
He'll be back in the Pulmino, in the Gruppetto in Italy, they say, the autobus. And that's where the sprinters get together. They try to limit their losses on the climbs. They ride really hard across the flats. They go very fast on the descents, take a lot of chances. They know exactly how much time percentage-wise they can afford to lose, and they try hard to make it as close to that as possible.
Well, it's actually interesting that Bob brings up the elimination times, because today is classified as a day of great difficulty. It's given the same elimination time as some of the big mountain top finishes, and in fact the elimination time today at a quick calculation will be around about 10%, which means you can lose 6 minutes for every hour of racing. And Bob and myself have in the past been excellent mathematicians at working out just exactly how much time we have to get inside the finishing line. It's amazing riding one of these grand tours because everybody at the side of the road, Phil, has a radio and they're listening to the race finishes, and nowadays many of them have portable televisions. And as soon as you hear the winner's name being announced on the radio, you look at your watch, calculate how long you've been out on the road, and then multiply up the elimination time to know just exactly where you are on the course. Not much fun, but somebody's got to do it.
And then you break out in a cold sweat when you know you're not going to make it.
Well, that's happened to me on several occasions, and I've taken 1 or 2 risks on the descent of mountains to try and make up a bit of time to stay inside the elimination. It's amazing how riders are capable of doing it, and what people don't understand sometimes is you have to be present on every individual stage of a Grand Tour. You can't have a day off. It's not like football and having time out for 10 or 15 seconds. You have to stay in there every day, every kilometre. You have to be present.
Absolutely. Well, based on Paul's theory here, 10%, about half an hour is the elimination time today for the back of the field. And the clock starts as soon as the winner hits the line. And if that clock face goes to black, it means the elimination time just happened. Anybody that comes in after that are simply not scored. They're just given their suitcase and airline ticket and they're on their way. We're looking at Francesco Casagrande here, now slipped away from his high 3rd place overall to 11th at the moment, on the right of our picture. Not at all riding like we expected him on Terminillo.
No, on the Terminillo climb, he looked so smooth and so comfortable in the front of the peloton throughout the first week. We thought we might see some real fireworks from Casagrande. Turned out to be a dud, but Pavel Tonko, who you just saw on the screen, did a really good ride, coming in 4th place on the stage, I believe, right behind Noe, and he was right behind Simoni and Garzelli. But it was a brutal stage and opened up huge gaps. Look at this climb and look at the crowds in Toscana.
Which way do they go, Bob?
I think they go straight up this hill, just right behind the motorcycle there, and we don't even see this on the race profile. unless they've gotten further to the finish that we can expect. But
these hills don't count, do they?
These hills don't even count for Gran Premio della Montagna. This is the Valico La Valletta, which is a very stiff climb in Toscana, and they haven't even given it the common decency to put some mountaintop points at the top of it. But I can tell you, this is very difficult. Look at that climb right there.
It's around 18% in places, isn't it?
It's very steep, very hard, heavy-duty race course today for these riders.
Well, you get a chance to see how heavy duty it is as we re-look at the front men on the road now. You really get a chance to see how difficult these roads are, and it really is becoming a war of attrition, because on the main field we saw the big names like Francesco Casagrande on the front just riding tempo, and the time advantage of the 16 leaders is dropping quite dramatically right now. We've come down to 2 minutes 35 seconds. At the back end of the group there you can see the rider from Formaggio Pinzoli. He was in fact Nocentini, a former world under-23 champion, and on the front end Panaria obviously, Phil, want to try and get the victory today because they're riding into home ground, and Paolo Lanfranchi is the kind of man who would look for breakaways like this. He's a fair way down in the overall classification. He's lost himself about 10 minutes so far, but a ride like this on a day like this could move you quite a long way up in the classification.
Well, he's come across from the now defunct Mappe team, and he's a good catch for Panaria. He's helped lift them into a really competitive team. This is definitely his type of race route, a former winner of the Tour de Langkawi in Malaysia. And that's a multi-day race, a veritable tour of the Malaysian Peninsula, that one. And that's run off in February, which is a very hot time of the year in Asia. There's the pink jersey on the shoulders of the race leader, Stefano Garzelli. And he's just holding his team on pressure on the front because they're a little bit worried about the whereabouts of Leonardo Bercianetti, who is 4 minutes and 19 seconds behind, and he's the best placed man in that escape. The last time check we got is 2 minutes and 45 seconds. So they're slowly but surely closing in, and it looks as though they've got a little help there from Francesco Casagrande as well, and also Pavel Tonkov in that orange jersey. We'll take another break. Don't go far away. And welcome back. Well, the Giro d'Italia today is an absolute runaway. We're only 50 kilometres from the finish, despite the terrain, despite the fact this is listed as one of the tough stages. This breakaway is 16 getting away after a series of attacks in the first 50 kilometres of racing today. And we're looking down now at, it looks as though Gilberto Simone's team have also decided that this could be getting a little bit out of hand.
Yes, absolutely. That's the Saeco team on the front of the bike race. They have a rider in the breakaway who's actually the best place in GC, but Simone even worried about this time gap, and they're closing it down now, as well as the Vini Calderola team. Also, Francesco Casagrande on the front of the group. You know it's a really hard stage when our race leaders have come out to the front and are starting to do the tempo, and the Vini Calderola team starting to fall apart a little bit, not having the power to close down this breakaway on a very difficult stage.
Let's not forget Saeco is the strongest team in the Giro d'Italia. They are leading the king of the teams competition, and of course they are all rallying around one man, Gilberto Simone. They're not even worried about the presence of their young rider in the leading group, Bertagnoli, who started the day in 16th place in the overall classification. As far as they're concerned, they're getting on with their plan for the day, and I think what they're trying to do is toughen it up just a little bit, Bob, before we come to Monte Trebbio, because Gilberto Simone is no mean descender, and he may well try and do something on the descent of that climb, something we've seen him do many, many times in the past.
Yes, and strategically, if Bertagnoli can stay with the front of this breakaway, the riders that are attacking from behind in the finale of the bike race, that will give Saeco an extra man in the front just to watch after, take care of Gilberto Simone. We might see a little bit of a war on the GC battle.
Well, as Bertagnoli sat at the back, he's not working in that breakaway. He's just doing his job as a policeman, as we call him, keeping an eye on the rest of them. He'll know his teammates have livened up the chase behind. It's come down now to 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So it's taken them about 10 kilometres to chip off 15 seconds. This is the normal rate of progress at this stage of the race. We're around about 48 kilometres now from the finish of the event. There is quite a tough climb coming, the Monte Trebbio, which will leave them at the top of that climb, just a 24-kilometre race to the line. And that is a lovely place to springboard if you've got the legs. This is the breakaway, and the rider on the left of our picture there wearing the Championship of Norway colours. He's the national road race champion, Kurt Arvidsson. He is a very good sprinter from a small group like this, and if he can get down to the finish, he would have a real good chance of winning this. And I might stand corrected, but I don't think, Paul, we've ever had a Norwegian rider win a stage before.
We'd have to
We've had
look a long way
Swedish.
back down the records, Phil, for
I don't
that.
think we have. Bob will do that while we have a commercial break in a few seconds' time. 2 minutes 30 seconds is the gap. This is Dario Gioni sitting at the back for the Fassa Bortolo. They've got 2 men in the breakaway. The race goes on. 47 kilometres to go. We'll take a short break. Come back. And welcome back. We're looking at the breakaway today on the 10th stage of the Giro d'Italia as we head from Montecatini Terme to Faenza. 202 kilometres. We're flying through the roads today. The gap, though, is continuing to descend. 2 minutes 28, the last time check. Now, Bob has been racking his brains during the commercial break, and he's come up with Dag Erik Pettersen as the last Norwegian to win a stage. We should never have forgotten about our old friend Knudsen, who's long since retired, but he won quite a few stages of this race.
Yes, he was a great time trialer and rival to Eddie Merckx during some of his glory years towards the latter part of Merckx's career. Knut Knudsen, a great bike racer from Norway. A lot of really good bike racers coming out of Scandinavia. Even one of our teammates from the 7-Eleven days who we raced the Giro with, Dag Otto Lauritsen, a great champion from Norway as well. Great bike racers come from up there, and they don't mind the cold weather at all either. But in the heat, they do suffer a little bit sometimes.
He was a very big man, Knut Knudsen. I remember when I was the race director of the Tour of Britain, he came on the Norwegian amateur team, fell off and wanted to go home. And I didn't want to send him because it cost more money. So we compromised. He stayed for 3 days and then I sent him home. We became quite good friends after that, but at the time it wasn't very friendly.
But when he turned professional, he did become a superb rider, especially taking part in all the Italian races at the time. The sport was not quite as international as it is nowadays, and in fact 1 year in the Giro d'Italia, Knudsen got himself 3 stage wins, and he wore the pink jersey as well for a very long time before actually crashing out.
Yes, he was a very powerful speed man on the bike, that's for sure. Well, we're looking at the leaders, we're looking at the Fassa Bortolo team car here because they've got 2 men in that front group as we swing back up to the front group riders now. And the 2 riders in orange there, Tirolongo and Lanfranchi, as we speak about them. It looks like an attack here from Seiko. Well, this has got to be Bertignotti, who's having a little dig while his teammates try to chase him from the back. He's trying to go away off the front. And Bertignoli, I beg your pardon, as he's the best placed man in this break. He's looking for 4 minutes 28 seconds of lost time to become the new leader of the Tour. And I don't think it would do Stefano Garzelli very much harm, Bob, if he were to take the lead, frankly.
No, that wouldn't be too bad at all, because one would imagine he will fade in the mountains. I think he's gotten word back that the Saeco team is chasing on the front. They want to slingshot him forward a little bit in case a big raid is put in by Simoni. Simoni would then have a really strong ally in the finale of the bike race and try to maybe get some time on Garzelli today. But that's a cheeky little move there, attacking on an uncategorized climb, but quite hard. I think that's the Monte Casale.
Well, there's confirmation there, Phil, as well, that Seiko so far are the most consistent team in the Giro d'Italia. They lead Alessio and Lampre. Now, this team competition is based on the positions of the best 3 riders on every individual stage. And it's an indication of the fact that the team is very strong indeed. And this is the team that are hoping to support Gilberto Simoni in his quest to win the Giro d'Italia for a second time. I think basically this attack we've just looked at here, Phil, was trying to get rid of 1 or 2 riders in the breakaway who at this stage are starting to become passengers.
Well, just look at this. This is going to hurt 1 or 2 riders in this breakaway for sure. That's Denny Lungi just behind him there, the Alessio man. He doesn't want to help out if they're going to keep that sort of pressure on. So he's passing it back here now to the Paneria rider Paolo Tirolongo and Paolo Lanfranchi. This is Tirolongo here looking over his shoulder, checking out who's going to come forth. But if they keep going stop-go like this, sooner or later they're going to find this break will fragment.
I can see Bob shaking his head there. You see what has happened there because of that acceleration is it's taken the impetus out of the breakaway, hasn't it, Bob? When somebody attacks like that, nobody really then afterwards wants to cooperate.
They want to catch the breakaway, but then they want to sit on the break, especially a hard attack like that. The riders behind catching up to Bertagnoli, but then just sitting on, and then you have a moment of confusion there. Then the rhythm of the breakaway is absolutely shattered, and I think the pressure has been on so hard in the breakaway. That's why they've been able to maintain this gap, that there's a lot of tired legs now. Bertagnoli trying to get rid of some of the passengers, but it didn't do anything except slow down the breakaway in the long run. So you got to keep cooperating for a little bit further. We still have a ways to go in the stage. So Lanfranchi and Tiralongo from the Panaria team would love to get a stage win in their home region of Faenza. And we saw Lanfranchi get a great win a couple of years ago in the Giro d'Italia. And last year, we also saw the Alessio rider get a great win, Denny Lunghi. So it's going to be a very competitive little sprint all the way to the finish. And it looks like Bertagnoli's put in another attack now.
Well, Bertagnoli obviously on fire today, Phil, obviously under orders to try and attack that break all of the time. But we are now on the penultimate climb of the day, and one of the other uncategorized climbs at this year's Giro d'Italia. This is the Monte Casale, and it climbs up for around about 7 or 8 kilometers, and it really is going to be rather difficult. We're just coming out of the town of Brighiera, which is at the bottom of the climb here of Casale, and right now I think we'll see a serious fracturing of the main field. We're going to have 2 very difficult climbs here in succession.
These roads are what the riders would call extremely heavy roads indeed. They just go up and down. It's a very quick time as well today. They've only got about 42 kilometers to race. That's something like 26 miles, so that's little on an hour cycling to come. And they've still got this rather nasty climb, which is an official climb near the end, some 24 kilometers from the finish. So there's lots of chance for the riders in the main field to recover their lost time, and indeed lots of time for men like Mario Cipollini to lose a lot of time in the next hour as well. They can probably expect to lose another 5 minutes on the men who are pushing the pressure at the front. But that breakaway is the sort of move we expected today on this sort of a course. The man in pink there, Stefano Garzelli, can't be expected to stop everybody attacking him. So he's got to gamble occasionally. This is one of the day's big gambles for him, as he allows those riders to run in the hope that he will bring them back. This is the main field here now, preoccupied, I think, looking for drinks as the hands go up there. These riders not too happy with the response there, but he wants a drink and he's getting a bit desperate. This is the breakaway, and still here at the front, it's the Seiko man who's setting the pace with a little bit of help from Fassa Bortolo. That's Nocentini. Sorry, that's not Nocentini on the right there. It's Brusegin who's sitting up there on the right of the picture. But this has been a good composition, because a lot of, when you've got 16 men clear and virtually all of them individuals, there's not, a couple of teams have got 2 men in, and then they've every reason to race because there's a chance for a big prize at the end. Paneria are very inspired because their team is sponsored and their sponsorship exists at the finishing town of Faenza.
Well, it's always difficult when you've got a large breakaway, and that's the one thing that the leaders of a bike race do not want, isn't it, Bob? To get a large group of 10 or 15 men off the front, because it is so much more difficult to control and to pull back. Normally a break like that, if it's that large, you would hope that somebody is not so close in the overall classification, but the presence there of Bertagnoli has put pressure on Stefano Garzelli. I feel Garzelli wants to keep the pink jersey for as long as possible, and that's why he's had his men on the front end of the main field, just making sure they set a tempo, preventing this group from going too far at the front. That's Brusegin on the front, on the right-hand side there for Fassa Bortolo. But Bertagnoli, I think, Bob, has been given the order by the team behind to keep the pressure on for as long as possible. This looks like Simone. It is.
Well, this is a big attack now coming from the back of the field, or from the peloton. This is Monte Casale, that's not categorized on the race route, but very heavy indeed. And it looks like Gilberto Simoni is taking this chance. This is a very hard stage. He wants to weaken up the riders from the Vini Caldirola team, and now they're into all kinds of desperation. This is an incredible attack put in by Simoni. He cannot wait any longer for the GC battle to start unfolding, and he's put in a huge attack here. He knows he can climb well. He's also a great descender, and this is a little replay of it right there on the right side of the screen. This is a shock wave. You can see Garzelli looking up the road. He just can't believe it, and all he can do now is hope that his teammates can close the gap a little bit. He definitely doesn't want to come out and start racing this far from the finish line on a stage that's not even a really mountainous stage.
Well, this is the area of the race routes where everybody was commenting this hill should have been categorized possibly with a first category tag. It's a very steep climb, and it doesn't count at all for the King of the Mountains. Simone obviously has noted it. This was very definitely a plan by one of the race favourites. We'll come back very quickly and update you on his progress. We're looking now at the main field. On the left of our picture is the man who's just attacked them, one of the big favourites, lying second overall, Gilberto Simoni. We've just had a little glimpse of the breakaway, Bob, and you nearly fell off your chair laughing because Simoni's teammate is attacking in the breakaway.
Simoni's just caught the remnants of the break now, and his teammate was going off the front of the break while he went off the front of the peloton. Desperation in the pedaling motion of the Vini Caldirola team. Simoni closed down a 2.5-minute gap in just a few meters on this climb, just a couple of kilometers going uphill. Unbelievable effort now being put in by Gilberto Simoni, and I think that Garzelli himself will have to come out here and attack and start to try to close that gap a little bit. He can't wait for his team, and look how small the front of the peloton is.
You can see a lot of riders in difficulty at the back end of what is now becoming a very small peloton. Just on the back here is Radislo Ramonik from the CCC Polsat team. Just in front of him, Gianni Farazin. But I tell you one thing, that is an unbelievable attack, Bob. I think everyone was expecting the attack to come on the Monte Trebbio because it is a very difficult climb. It's almost 7 kilometers in length. But this does not really explain why Gilberto Simoni decided to surprise everybody and go out earlier. This is an unbelievable move by this man. I think he said, well, Stefano Garzelli's had the jersey for a number of days right now, but I am the strongest man in the bike race, and look at the pressure it's putting on Garzelli's teammates.
Whatever happened to the big pack of riders? Because here the Vini Caldirola, the survivors on the team, are trying to get their pink jersey back in action. Remember, we're looking here, Bob, at 31 seconds time difference. That's all Simoni needs to take the pink jersey.
Yes, I think he's been very much upset by the little time gaps that have been opening up on the first day. He wants to close a little bit time down on Garzelli. Also, he wants to force him to come out and use his own legs. Zampieri from Switzerland on the front of the group, followed by Mazzoleni, and then Garzelli. That's all that's left of the Vini Caldirola team, and I think Garzelli himself will have to go into action here, maybe on the last climb, and try to limit his losses to Simoni. This is a great move by Simoni, considering how difficult the course is. He won't have to worry about an aerodynamic advantage from the peloton because there's almost nobody left in that group, and I think it's going to have to be Garzelli himself that comes out and tries to close this gap down. He's going to have to take very careful note of how much time Simoni is gaining so he can gauge his effort after his teammates are blown out the back, and I think it's Garzelli himself that's going to have to take the reins and close the gap on Simoni, and he is flying up the road right now, and he's going to make the juncture to his teammate directly, and then they'll have a 1-2 punch of Saeco going all the way into Faenza.
Well, the big advantage Gilberto Simoni has is the fact that he's an exceptionally good climber. We've seen that in the big high mountains. He's won himself mountaintop finishes in the past, but he's also, Phil, a man who is excellent at going downhill, and that's the advantage if you're a climber. Most climbers are lightly built men, and they're not very good at going downhill, but this man has taken the advantage in the Giro d'Italia on descents in the past, and it's putting some serious pressure on the leader right now. Let's just refresh ourselves with the overall classification. Garzelli is leading Simoni at the start of the day by 31 seconds. Andrea Noe is still in third place, 54 seconds back. Pelizzotti. Pavel Tonkov is still riding very well, and he's in this group right now. If you get a chance to see the orange jersey, he's a minute 50 down. But the confusion there right now, as we look down on Simoni, is he's starting to catch the men who've been leading this bike race since the 60th kilometre.
Well, we're looking here at Constantino Zabala, who is trying to go clear as well, because he's doing very well in that King of the Mountains. But this breakaway of 16 men right now has been spread right across this climb, which is not an official King of the Mountains climb at all. But those riders who knew the area knew that this would give the strong men a real chance in this race. It's completely annihilated that 16-rider breakaway. Simoni is ahead for sure, but I think Garzelli at the moment is beginning to claw him back. But this is a part of the race we didn't really expect. We'll take a quick break and rejoin us for all of the action as we head to the last 30 kilometres. And welcome back to the roads of the Giro d'Italia, and what is turning out to be quite an amazing stage today. We're looking here at the lone leader now, the remnant of a 16-man breakaway. This is Constantino Zabala, as he tries now to hold the whole field up. Well, not the whole field, yes, but they're still split up. And still ahead of Stefano Garzelli is the big danger man, Gilberto Simoni. This is an amazing, and you can see where we are now, Bob. We're quite up in the highs. A little bit concerned about the changing of the cloud formation there, because we are expecting thunder showers.
Well, if the skies do open up and we get some rain, these roads already dangerous enough. Very narrow, very treacherous descents. They will become absolute madness down to the finish line. And we mentioned earlier that this climb, not even on the race profile as being categorized, is a very difficult, tricky descent, and Simone continues to make progress. He's on the descent now, and he's chasing Zavalla. We'll see how far he is on that. We haven't been given a lot of time splits. We had 13 seconds from Zavalla to the Inseguitori, the followers, but we're not sure if Simone is the follower or the remnants of the breakaway.
Well, the breakaway is still caught in no man's land at the moment, but what remains of the main peloton, the pink jersey group here, is not very much more, Phil, than 30 riders, and that's all because of the pressure on that last climb, which was not categorized in the Giro d'Italia this year, the Monte Casale. We're now on the descent of the Monte Casale, and in around about 4 kilometers we'll begin the climb of this very difficult ascent, the Monte Trebbio, and that, I think, is where we'll see serious pressure come under this group. For the moment, Stefano Garzelli must not panic. He's got 2 teammates around him, 2 very strong guys, Zampieri, and in second position there, Eddie Mazzolini, who himself is pretty high in the overall classification. They must allow Simone to make this attack and try and claw their way back to him later on in the race.
I'm pretty sure, because our camera's now totally committed, we've only got 3 cameras down there. 1 will follow the leader, 2 normally follows the second group. I think it's found Simone, and 3 will stay with this lot. But I think we've got about 10 riders in between somewhere, because Freddy Gonzalez is absent from our screens, and he must be up there, as will indeed be Paolo Lanfranchi. So there's a big group in here somewhere, and I think Simone is fast approaching them myself.
Simone must be rapidly approaching, because at the top of that final climb just a few moments ago, the advantage of the leaders was just 1 minute and 30 seconds. But it's fabulous to watch the way these cameras follow the bike riders downtown, down the mountains, because I know from my own experience, the motorbikes have a very difficult time getting round these corners quite as easily as the bikes do. And it is really remarkable, Bob, that those motorbikes with a cameraman hanging on the back can go down these mountains at almost 60 miles an hour.
Well, the motorcycle's having a lot more weight, especially when you add a passenger and a heavy camera. Simone just flying down the road there, sketchy descent. It's quite impressive, the technical prowess of the following motorcycles, and they have to be specially approved by the race organizers to follow the race, and a lot of skill. Here's Zavalla up to the front, 24-second lead. Time check we're being given right now. We'll see who that's from. It doesn't seem like it's that far to me.
Well, that time check is over the chasing riders. The 24-second gap as well is the gap between Simone and Garzelli at the moment, as we're going through the small town halfway through the valley right now. This town is the small town of Mogliara, and then in a few moments' time we'll begin this very difficult climb. And what a climb it is going to be, because these guys have had a very long day in the saddle, almost 6 hours of racing so far, and many riders now left well down the race route this afternoon. Men like Mario Cipollini, Robin McEwen, Alessandro Patacchi, they are at the moment around about 15 minutes in arrears. But when we start this climb, Bob, I think Stefano Garzelli, if he wants to keep himself in the pink jersey this afternoon, really has to take responsibility of the chase.
Yes, he's going to, I think, have to take it up. We'll see how his teammates can do the last climb. The Trebbio climb is very hard. Both Zampieri and Mazzolini have been doing a great effort so far to keep Garzelli close. And here's a crash. And that looks like one of our riders who was in the breakaway earlier.
Indeed.
And
Charlie Regalis has gone down there, Phil,
Charlie,
number 48. He was in the pink jersey group just a few moments ago. He looks as if he's got a slight problem there. Pity, because Charlie was high up in the overall classification, 24th at the start of today. And just going around that corner, I think he just overcooked it a bit. And thank you very much to the organisation for putting those bales there, because that would have otherwise been a very dramatic crash. I think Charlie will be okay. He should be able to get up. And interestingly enough, although Charlie is British, he was actually born in Finland. He looks like he's in a bit of difficulty there, though, Phil.
Well, I hope he comes out of this, because, as you say, Paul, he's 24th overall. He was born in Finland, but he comes from Middle Britain, really, from Cheshire, and he doesn't look at all well. His job in this race was to stay close to his team leader, Sergei Gonchar, and then get the chance, if he had, to improve himself. He had a wonderful ride at the Terminilo, and we don't want Charlie to drop out of this race right now, because I think he's on for a high classification finish. Anyway, we'll find out what happens to Charlie, but he was back in the bunch containing Garzelli, and now the Garzelli's group obviously in hot pursuit of Gilberto Simone primarily. Simone is only 6 seconds away from taking over the lead of this race, while we look at the man who is out for the stage win, Constantino Zabaya, and he has about 24 kilometers to go. Here comes Simone. Boy, this is a good day of racing in the Giro. We'll take a short break. Well, there's some information for you on today's stage of the Giro. The race leader, Zabala, out ahead, a minute 16 ahead of Gilberto Simoni, with the fielder chomping on the heels of Simoni in desperation, one feels, because Simoni is not far away now from becoming the new leader of the Tour.
Well, it's a brave move by Simoni. All of the big men here, Phil, coming to the front end of the main field. We're now starting the climb of the Monte Trebbio. Just looking over there, this was a man who was in the leading group a few moments ago. The climb itself goes up to almost 2,000 feet in altitude. It's 5.7 kilometers in length. The average gradient is 6.85, but it does, on a certain number of points, kick up to around about 10%. This now is the chaos that is being caused by Gilberto Simoni catching one by one the men who have been in that breakaway since the early part of the stage, I should say. He's going past Dario Cioni here, and he gets a chance to see just exactly what the man who's won the Giro d'Italia looks like in full flight.
This is an incredible move by Simoni, a very aggressive attack. He's riding the stage flat out, and he knew perhaps how difficult this course was going to be. And this is another hard climb before we get into the finish in Faenza, and Simoni we're going to have to look at the remnants of the breakaway. Zabella doing the damage at the front, but Simoni is carving them up from the rear.
This is an amazing piece of riding by Gilberto Simoni. The crowd are going to will him to the summit here now. He's got his fine climbing rhythm. Look how this breakaway, this Freddy Gonzalez just in front of him, the leader in the King of the Mountains, about to blow by him as well.
This is Zampieri, who's been dropped now from the group of the pink jersey. He's done his work for the day, a lot of pressure. We're now looking at Simoni catching Freddy Gonzalez, the little climber who leads the King of the Mountains competition. He's got himself a lot of points out on the course today. He's had a very good day in that breakaway, but right now all he's worried about is surviving. He's going to try and stay on the tail of the leader of the bike race right now. This is Gilberto Simoni, and I tell you one thing, Phil, it's the first 4 kilometers which are the most difficult, because they kick up to, in places, around about 10%. This has been a very difficult stage today as we get a chance to look down at the front end of the bike race there. Right now you can see the counterattack coming. It looked as if that was Paolo Lanfranchi trying to shoot off the front, but look how close Gilberto Simoni has come to the remnants of that breakaway.
He's almost onto them now. Well, these are the missing men that we couldn't find because our cameras were following Gilberto Simoni, but there they all are now. There is the peloton, what's left of it, containing the pink jersey of Stefano Garzelli, who must be very, very concerned now about the way this race is turning against him. Simoni knew about that climb that was not categorized. He chose it to go for it, and he's hanging on here now. He only has to have a few seconds at the finish. He'll also get a bonus if he makes the first 3 over the line, and that will give him the pink jersey. I was just debating, Bob, as to why he would want to take the race lead this early.
Well, I think he's just anxious to get on with the race now. That was a shot of Mazzolini, who's dropped as well, and we saw Zampieri drop before, so now it's just Garzelli on the front of the peloton. Here's Simoni on the front of the remnants of the breakaway. He's still chasing Zavalla, and he's caught up to almost everybody. Contrini there, and just Zavalla left probably in the front of the bike race. We haven't seen his teammate Bertagnoli, but he will probably be between Zavalla and Simoni. 28 seconds now to Zavalla. That's another minute he's taken out of him, just like that. In the first couple of kilometers of this climb, Simoni is flying today. We're going to have to see the damage that's been done to the Garzelli group, that is now chasing.
Well, look at the difference in the style here. You can almost feel the difference in the speed. Now he's made contact with his teammate. Look at his teammate Bertagnoli just looking over there, and he will accelerate now and try and give as much of a hand to his team leader as he can over the next few kilometers. But the way Gilberto Simoni is charging up this mountain, I don't think that help will last for very long. Look at the face. This is a very brave move, Phil.
It's a very serious move indeed. This was so well planned here, and that's why he had a teammate in that leading group who knew this was going to happen. There's the chase behind now. The pink jersey himself, with no teammates left, has got to do the pacemaking to bring him back, and Sabalikis is right behind him on guard for Simoni.
Well, look at that gap. 58 seconds is the gap now between Gilberto Simoni and the pink jersey of Stefano Garzelli. Casagrande coming up alongside Garzelli here right now. I think the men in the pink jersey group, all they can do for the moment is basically just ride a tempo. They're trying to defend their positions. They don't want to lose too much time right now, because the man who is leading the charge behind Constantino Zaballa is doing an unbelievable performance. Gilberto Simoni has taken the Giro d'Italia to date by the throat.
By the throat is right, and he's got it in his sights there. Bertagnoli trying to do as much as he can. He only did maybe 500 meters, maybe a kilometer so far. Simoni sitting on his wheel now. If the road does flatten out, then he'll really need Bertagnoli to make a hard tempo and put some more distance between himself and Garzelli. Garzelli is going to have to start racing himself now, and it looks like there's some real pressure coming on. It looks like Casagrande from the Lamprey team putting in an attack. Now the Giro d'Italia is coming alive today with only a few categorized climb, but a very heavy-duty race course. Number 111, Casagrande now on the attack himself. It doesn't seem if he's been marked by Garzelli right now. It's all falling apart for Garzelli at this point in the bike race. It looks like one of the Domina Vacanze riders has matched that acceleration by Casagrande, and we'll have to see if Garzelli can start to defend the pink jersey. He might be waiting for the last moment to pit in a huge. There he is. Now he's at the front. He's got Andrea Noe on his wheel and Popovic on his wheel, or that looks like Pelizzotti, however, and it is a full-blown bike race right now, and there's Noe trying to close a gap along with Tonkov and stay close to Garzelli.
Well, the Domino Vacanze rider there is Michele Scarponi, who's got across there, but we expected that Stefano Garzelli would be put under an awful lot of pressure. Honchar on the back there, he was admirably looked after by Charlie Wegelius, his British teammate who crashed just a few moments ago, but now we can see that the serious pressure is coming onto the pink jersey group. Stefano Garzelli, I feel, Bob, under serious pressure for the first time this year, probably because of the fact that after all he's had 12 months out of competition. That is Marco Pantani at the back of the group, just grappling to try and stay in contact there, and just getting on the back there was Kim Kirchen as well for Fassa Bortolo, the Luxembourger, who is one of the integral parts of the Fassa team. There is Zabaya. This is the duo now of the very strong Seiko riders who are trying to pull back the last leader, and there's only 10 seconds. About 6 kilometers ago, the advantage of Zabaya over Simoni was 1 minute and 15 seconds. So in 6 kilometers, Phil, he's wiped out almost a complete minute's advantage.
And this teammate of his here, Bercianotti, or Cianoli, is really giving all now just to give him a breather, and then he knows he's going to go on alone and he'll drop back. And Kurt Alverson is taking advantage of the fighting. I just saw the kite flying. I think it's about 1 kilometer to the top of the climb here, but it's going to be a win for Simoni if he keeps this up, because here he comes onto the shoulder now of Zabaya. And Zabaya will be very surprised when he sees the arrival of the man in red. Takes a good look at him. Can't believe it's number 151. This is a man, remember, who left the peloton right in sight of the leader of the Tour and rode the whole race off his wheel. He's gone straight to the front on the last climb of the day. Here is Garzelli, clearly having an off day, and this, I think, the result of his 1 year out of the sport, Paul, because you need that competition to be sharp.
Well, his story was that he matched his kilometres mile for mile out of his training handbook from the year before, but that does not substitute competition. And I think right now he's lacking just a little bit in endurance, but what courage he's finding, Phil, to dig so deep, to try and keep himself in the pink jersey. Look at that. You can imagine, Bob and I can remember almost the pain that is going through his body here. He knows he has to stay in contact with that small group there just in front of him, because if he can just go over the summit of this climb with those guys, he stands a chance of staying high in the overall classification. If you crack at a moment like this, Bob, you lose an awful lot of time.
Yes, he'd lose tons of time. He's doing a good job to limit his losses. Now he's in a group that will cooperate with each other to get to the finish and limit their losses to Gilberto Simoni. He still has his teammate Bertagnoli with him. Simoni, the two Seiko riders at the front of the race. Bertagnoli dying like an animal will say with Simoni, because he knows that he can put the pressure on the flat and descents into Faenza, and it looks like some of the other breakaway riders trying to catch up to Simoni. This is where it flattens off a little bit before it kicks up to the top of the KOM. Simoni in the front, Garzelli chasing. It's a desperate moment in the Giro d'Italia.
Simoni actually being very sensible there, in fact not deciding to force alone with his teammate, but waiting for these other riders to come forward, because he realises we've come up the steepest part of the climb right now. We're actually levelling out to just 2 or 3% grade. He knows that with 24 kilometres to go over the summit of this climb, a larger group has got a much better chance of success. And the other riders in this group will actually work with them, Phil, because Arvidsson, for example, Zabaya, they know they've got very good chances of getting themselves a stage victory. They're not worried about the overall classification at all. What they're worried about is surviving off the front end of the main field and getting themselves a stage victory in this year's Giro d'Italia.
Well, Kurt Arvidsson doing one of the best rides of his career here, if he can get down to the finish with the quality of these riders. The champion of Norway, team leader of the Factor team, Now, I think Simone very wise here. None of those riders with him are going to worry him for the race for the pink jersey. They've lost too much time, so why not use their strength as the roads ease out once the climb is over and gain more time on the way into the finish. He's not even looking for the stage win, although it would be very nice. He is looking simply to gain time over that rider in pink. And this is the best way to do it. Just on 1 kilometre to the summit now of the climb. The road has eased mercifully a little bit.
Well, this is not really much of a summit of the King of the Mountains here. It's fairly flat, in fact, and I think now this group will work extremely well together. There's 24 kilometres, well, in fact, 25 kilometres to go, 24 from the summit of the climb. Zabaya in a bit of difficulty just at the back of the group, but he's the man who literally exploded, dynamited the breakaway of 16 riders that began this final climb of the day together. And right now, I think fairly happy, Bob, to have the reinforcements in the shape of a man by the name of Gilberto Simoni.
Well, he went on the attack there to get the King of the Mountain points, dropped Freddy Gonzalez, our erstwhile leader. These will be some more big points for Zabaya on the Kelme team. They love to climb. They're great climbers. He attacked the peloton, the group, excuse me, the breakaway to get the King of the Mountain points. And now let's see if he can hang on, but it looks like he's getting dropped by Simoni. He might not even get any points there, and that is the King of the Mountain sprint there. Zabaya, no points at all. He's going to come across and last from those 5 riders, and I think, well, Freddy Gonzalez won't get any points, but I think it's 5-3-1. So he made a huge attack, and it's come to nothing because Simoni has decided that he is going to attack for the pink jersey, and he's the strongest rider in this bike race at this point.
It really is quite remarkable to see the pedaling action of Gilberto Simoni here. He's looking back to see what damage he's done there. He's still got a breakaway of 4 riders. He encourages Tirolongo to come forward there. Looking further down, it's Casagrande leading out Scarponi. Casagrande is a phenomenal bike rider, but Arvidsson now, Phil, in difficulty. Let's not forget these guys have been in a very long breakaway today. The breakaway basically formed after 80 kilometres, so these men have actually been leading the bike race for around about 100 kilometres. That's 2.5 hours at the head of affairs.
Yes, this is a tough race now as they come up towards the summit here, and it's well spread out now. I think Simoni will try and await these boys because there'll be different riders on the other side of the climb. And it wouldn't be a bad idea. He's not worried about the sprint for the summit. Tirolongo gets that. Simoni goes over in second. He was more intent on knowing what happened to his teammate because he wants that man back alongside him.
He certainly does. He knows that with the next 24 kilometres, 4 sets of legs are better than 1. You can see there will be an organisation in this group behind here as well. Coming to the summit of this climb, you can also notice that Robert Forster is moving into the group from Gerolstein, and that's a surprise name to conjure up. But in this group is the pink jersey of Stefano Garzelli. For the first time now, Phil, showing that he's in serious difficulty.
As he comes up to the summit here, the gap is not insurmountable. Garzelli, with an inspired run down to the finish, can still be the leader of this tour. And you think he doesn't know that? We'll take another break. And welcome back to the Giro d'Italia. There it is, 42 seconds. Garzelli is fighting back as they come off the mountains for the day. And he might yet save his jersey.
Well, he might do, because he's got a very good group of riders alongside him who all want to make sure that Gilberto Simoni doesn't steal the glory this afternoon. He's got in that group with him Francesco Casagrande, who wants to move up in the overall classification, and of course Andrea Noe is in this group as well. But what a brave move. Look at this now, Stefano Garzelli coming to the front. He suffered like a dog on that final climb there, Bob, and he really had to pull himself inside out. The summit of that King of the Mountains, in fact, was going to Tirolongo ahead of Simoni, and somebody's gone off the road here, and it may well be, it was hard to see who went off there, but definitely riders taking serious risks on this very difficult descent off the summit of the Monte Trebbio.
He must have had a flat tire because a teammate stopped to help him out there and pass a wheel over. That might have been Paolo Lanfranchi, who was dropped from the break but was able to stay in contention here with Stefano Garzelli's group, who are chasing back to our 4 leaders right now. That was Figueras, perhaps the leader of the Panaria team. We'll have to see the number there. Had we had this is Testa della Corsa, the front of the bike race. Desperate chase from behind Stefano Garzelli, trying to defend his pink jersey. If we see some unexpected climbs on the run into Faenza, I think we'll see Simoni continue to get more time and perhaps drop these riders that are with him. The Panaria rider desperately hanging on to Simoni's wheel. That's Tirolongo. He would love to get a stage for his sponsor that's based in the Finnish town of Faenza.
Well, just going inside 20 kilometers to go right now. That's going to take, at these speeds, I would say, about 25 minutes of racing. The most important man in this leading group of 4 right now is Gilberto Simoni. He started the day in 2nd position in the overall classification, just 31 seconds off the lead of Stefano Garzelli. It looked as if the race was disappearing from Garzelli, but in fact, behind now, a large group is starting to reform. This is Marco Pantani trying to reintegrate the front end of what has been a very difficult day of racing. In this group as well is Dario Frigo. Didn't have a very good day on the first mountain of the Giro d'Italia, but as this group swells, I think their pacemaking will pick up, and it may well be that the attack we've seen, Phil, of Gilberto Simoni is really just an announcement of the fine form that he's got in this year's bike race.
Well, I'll tell you what, Kurt Arvidsson's having the most inspired day of his career here. Turned professional in 1998. He's been the road race champion and is the current road race champion of Norway. There he is, 1 man up from the back, and if it comes to the sprint, he could well win this stage if he can stay away. Far from certain now. There's been a bit of inspired work by the race leader, despite the fact that Garzelli has lost all of his team on that climb. He is now trying to close the gap alone, and because of the interest of the other highly placed riders like Tonkov, Casagrande, they will be obliged to help him now, especially with the race favourite, the big favourite before this race started 10 days ago, Gilberto Simoni, doing one of the cheeky attacks, the attacks you don't normally see anymore at this level of the sport.
Yes, you don't oftentimes see this because it's become so calculated with the earpieces that the riders know exactly where everybody else is on the course. But this was a real surprise. They saw him go away, so it wasn't as if they did not know. They did not know it was coming, and it sent a shockwave into the peloton. There'll be some regrouping behind, and Garzelli has been on the front of the chase since Simoni attacked. He lost all of his teammates, so he's isolated in the front of the chase now. We can see all the way down the road, back here to the group that swells. Pantani's doing a good ride. You got to hand it to Marco Pantani for not giving up. He's in this group with the pink jersey, and the Lamprey riders will probably also try to organize and get their men, Rumsas and Casagrande, a little bit higher up on the GC. But I think when we saw Wigelius crash, we saw Julio Perez coming through in the second group of riders from the Panaria team, already dropped, so it's a really chaotic stage today. There will be some regrouping, and they might indeed catch these riders before we get to the finish in Faenza, but what an exciting stage we're having.
Well, Kurt Arvidson at the back there in the Norwegian national champions jersey was a former world under-23 champion as well. That was back in San Sebastian in '97. On that occasion, Phil, he produced a fairly fine sprint.
He did.
Because the man he beat into 2nd place was none other than Oscar Freire, who we all know his sprinting abilities right now.
Became twice a world champion at the biggest level.
At the top end of the sport.
Yeah.
Now, this is a serious move here right now by Gilberto Simoni, but I have a feeling it's not going to pay off here this afternoon, because this group is really starting to swell, and we've got a fairly undulating run-in on the way to the finishing line in Faenza, so it looks as if it may well all come back together. But it's great to see a move like that coming from Gilberto Simoni, very reminiscent of the kind of attack that Claudia Chiappucci would have put in, because it wasn't calculated at all. I think it was a spur-of-the-moment thing.
Well, there's an attack by Casagrande now, anxious to keep this pace up. He is lying 11th overall. He tried to go away from Garzelli on that climb, taking the chance like Simoni has done to gain time, but he got pulled back into the group, whereas Simoni is still problem number 1 out there in the lead. Slowly but surely this group is getting bigger now. It's been reinforced by riders at the back and also riders coming back from that leading group. There's a nice view from about 1,000 feet from the helicopter. And this is the group now led by Casagrande. Interesting time checks continuing to come our way. The gap is hovering now at the moment, and it's touch and go again. But even though the contours now show a steady downhill, there's Scarponi down there as well, a steady downhill to the finishing line, nothing could be further from the truth.
Well, they're going right up a hill right now, and these are the undulations that really kill the legs after you've done a whole day of climbing, and you're expecting a nice downhill run into the finish. You come to a climb, and it just takes all your morale away as the lactic acid really kills your legs.
Oh, a Norwegian champion tagged onto the back of this breakaway. He really had to dig deep into his reserves to hold on to Cipollini, to hold on to Gilberto Simoni on that climb. He's done it, and he isn't going to want this breakaway to be caught, that's for sure. It's the finest shot he's ever had at winning a stage of the Giro. The beauty of Italy and the high speed of the marathon men of the Giro d'Italia. 15 kilometres to go, slightly less now as we see the four leaders here. Zabala was the man who was up front. He's no longer here. He's back in the chase group. Bercignoli, Simoni, Arvidsson and Tiralongo are the four escapers.
Well, I think Marco Pantani, who we're looking at here, had a little scary moment there, Phil. I think he almost went off the road, so he's been dropped, I think, off the back of the group of Stefano Garzelli. A bit of confusion. These are very narrow racing roads indeed, and we're looking here at speeds of approaching 50 miles an hour. So everybody taking risks to scramble to try and pull this race back together. The biggest move really has come from Gilberto Simoni, a very brave move, coming 2 climbs from the finish on a race where the altitude has not really been all that high. The highest point of the day was only 950 meters, which is just inside of 3,000 feet of climbing. But certainly, Bob, this has been a fairly dramatic move by Gilberto Simoni, indicating that he is in fine form this year.
Very narrow roads, very hilly, very twisty, torturous roads, absolutely heavy duty. You can see that Pantani made a slight mistake on one curve, and now he's in a desperate chase just to catch up to the pink jersey group of Stefano Garzelli, and that is just an incredible stage that Simoni's put in so far. He's taken advantage. There's only width enough for 2 or 3 riders on these roads, let alone a whole peloton of 160 guys, and so Simoni taking advantage. I think on the day, on the profile, it looked heavy duty, but out on the race course, it's proved to be that much and a whole lot more.
Well, the good news is the thunder and lightning forecast in the afternoon hasn't arrived, and that is good news. You can see by the shadows the sun is still out here. But this breakaway driving on almost desperately now. We're 13 kilometres from the finish. Let's pull back and see where the chase group is. They are definitely closing in. I would say now Garzelli at this moment in time has recovered the pink jersey.
I agree with you, Phil. He's back in the pink jersey at the moment, but he still does have to make contact with Gilberto Simoni because there's that 20-second time bonus on the line. At the top of the last climb, the advantage, the difference between Simoni and Garzelli was almost the 1-minute mark. And I would have to say now, the next time we get an official time check, I think it will read about 15 seconds. Simoni still insists, but we've actually done the majority of the descending, the fastest part of the summit of this Monte Trebbio. Now we're into the flatter part, looking to head to the outskirts of town, and that will give the advantage to the big group which is starting to reform behind. Stefano Garzelli here looking over his shoulders. He's looking for a few friends to come forward and pick up the pacemaking.
Yes, and he doesn't seem to have many friends. I'm rather surprised that the other big riders in this race are allowing him to do all of the work. They're saying it's 10 seconds now, and that means well and truly he's back in pink. 23 seconds to Marco Pantani. We did see a cloud of dust to go up, and we saw the car just get round, and that is where we presume that Marco Pantani may well have fallen, but he got back on very quickly if he did.
Well, we're getting closer to the finish right now, and this black car in the back here is a neutral car which looks after all of the riders. You can see, to me, Gilberto Simoni getting very close to that photographer just in front there, taking advantage of every possible manoeuvre that he can to try and stay off the front end of the main field, Bob.
And here's the little time gap in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. That's the Shimano neutral support car. They give wheels to a rider in case their team car is not able to be put forward in the bike race, and they will get in behind the breakaways. But when the brake sees that car pass them, they know that the chasers are quite close, and they've put the Shimano car forward in the race. So Garzelli's group is now closing in on Simoni's group. And here's the time check. I think that's to Pantani. That's not to Garzelli. I think there's Garzelli's group there. So the gap might have gone up a little bit now, and that looks like it's Casagrande really going hard to limit the damage to Simoni at this point in the bike race. He's been Garzelli's #1 ally in the chase of Gilberto Simoni. So all the Italians, a little bit of infighting there perhaps, and Casagrande doing a big chase now. I'd say that was up to Garzelli to do, but the other riders in that group, because it is so big, starting to give a little bit of a help, and they're still on some climbs, even though it looked to be all downhill to the finish. That's not proved to be the case at all, and it looks like Pantani has come back into the chase group.
He's jumped on the tail there. It looks as though he may well have hurt his right elbow there, the way he's looking at it, but he's got back. And just a little less than half a minute now, but it is going the right way again. there's still hope here that these four might stay away. Now, this isn't like a routine flat day in the Tour. A group like this with only 28 seconds, 12 kilometres in the finish, we know they get wiped out. But this is a case where the whole race is now totally committed. It's not a question of let the fish run and reel them in at the finish. They are racing now to try and close gaps. All of these riders are just about in the red zone.
Everybody's in the red zone right now on what has been a very difficult stage. We've been in the saddle for 190 kilometres. Quite funny little anecdote at the back there. That is Marco Vello, the man there in the white jersey of Fassa Bortolo. He had to get himself back onto the main group there with Marco Pantani, and a couple of years ago he was a very good teammate. So it just goes to show in the sport of cycling, Phil, you should never really burn any bridges.
Absolutely right. Now remember, if Gilberto Simoni won the stage today, he would automatically get a 20-second time bonus. And so add on 11 seconds gap, he'd be the race leader. Think about that while we take another commercial break. It won't be very long. And welcome back to the Giro d'Italia. We're about 6 kilometres from the finish now as the riders race in. They haven't caught those four men yet. And I think, Bob, that the pink jersey there of Garzelli has found an ally in Francesco Casagrande.
Casagrande with a couple of teammates, Belli and Rumsaw still in the front. Lamprey having a great ride today on the team classification anyways. Garzelli, no teammates left. They had to do a huge chase of a very powerful breakaway throughout the stage. And right when it seemed as if they would make the juncture, Simoni himself attacked on 2 climbs from the finish, got a good gap. They went all the way down to 10 seconds as it was reorganizing behind on the final descent. Now it's gone back up again a little bit to about 18 or 20 seconds, and Simoni is putting everything into this breakaway. He knows he has a couple of flat stages now before they get into the big mountain stage, and maybe he wants the morale for his team of the pink jersey, and he's desperately fighting all out for that. And now here's the chase. You can see how hard they're riding. 2 Lamprey riders in the front, Casagrande and Belli, trying to get the gap down a little bit. That might be Tonkov from the Polstat team. He's also up there on GC. He wants to close the gap to Simoni. And here's the pink jersey really having a very hard day today.
And here's the next mileometer board coming up. This is 10 kilometres, 5 kilometres from the finish, so they're absolutely flying now. And now we can give you some little information on the finish. It's only the second time that the Giro d'Italia has finished in the Faenza. Michele Dancelli, he was a good sprinter, wasn't he?
Excellent sprinter, very fast man. We're now looking at a possibility of a man leaping out of this pack towards the end to try and get himself the stage victory. If Gilberto Simoni stays off the front of this group, he will have had a very hard ride to gain himself just a few seconds. The man doing the lion's share of the work is on the front there. Stefano Garzelli does not want to relinquish this jersey because after today's stage, which has been a very tough one, we've got a couple more flat stages which will turn it once again over to the sprinters, and right now they are in fact spreading across the road, which indicates the pressure is going out of the chase. Advantage goes back once again to Gilberto Simoni.
Well, I tell you what, Simoni put his nose right on the line here at 30-odd kilometres from the finish. He caught everybody ahead on his own, wiped them out, kept 3 of them on his back wheel, and has continued to race towards the line. He is now just on 4 kilometres from the finish, and this Tour of Italy, which is a race of over 2,200 miles, has become a veritable pursuit.
Quite remarkable. This man will not give up at all, and showing a very good tactical sense here, I think, Bob, by sitting up at the top of that climb and making sure that he didn't lose his teammate who's on the front there, Bertagnoli, as well as the other 2 riders, Tiralongo and Arvidsson, because he knows that those 2 riders will ride their hearts out right now over the last 3 or 4 kilometres just to survive and try and get themselves the stage victory. If the 4 survive, I've got to say that I think Arvidsson will win.
Arvidsson, following the team tactics that Facta has used throughout the Giro d'Italia, placing men in each breakaway. Arvidsson, a very fast sprinter, has a lot of resistance, hung tough on the climbs. Simoni's going to be desperate for the 20 seconds also to get the jersey, so that's going to be a flat-out sprint if those 4 can stay to the line. And let's not forget Tiralonga, a lot at stake as well, because Panaria, his sponsor, is from Faenza, so very thrilling finale. In the meantime, these riders trying to close the gap up to that 4 that are flying down the road. The one moment that Garzelli turned the heat off from the peloton, chasing behind, it spread out all across the road. Simoni went up the road a little bit, so he knows he has to. I don't see why he's sitting there. A couple of Kelme riders might try to try to get Zavaya back up into the front of the bike race, but Garcelli's going to have to keep pulling through, try to keep limiting his losses there. He needs to get down to about 5 seconds to have a chance to retain the jersey, because Simoni has a pretty fair sprint himself. It's going to be very exciting. Arvidsson needs to keep this breakaway going all the way to the finish, and he might be able to finally win a stage for Team Facta.
It's also a bit strange, Bob, because in this group, Francesco Casagrande has tried on several occasions to help Stefano Garzelli, but he has a teammate in the group as well, Phil, Raimundas Rumsas, and he's done nothing at all to the success of the juncture of Simoni and this group here right now. He's quite happy to sit halfway down the group. He's having a very quiet tour. Maybe he could be the secret weapon for the Lampre squad later on in the mountains.
He's the sort of rider, though, that profits by others' efforts. Remember him in the Tour de France last year when he got third. He did very little. We didn't see him much, but he didn't make any mistakes.
He made no mistakes at all, and I think that's probably what he's counting on here right now. Good to see, though, that CCC Polsat have sent their men forward. That's Darius Baranovsky. He'll be working for Pavel Tonkov, but the time gap once again is starting to stretch out. It's 18 seconds at 2 kilometres to go.
And if he wins, 20-second bonus, 20 plus 18 is 38. He's the race leader by 7. How are you at maths, Bob?
I wasn't great at math. I was better at languages. That's a great calculation. I think they'll close it down a little bit. Polstat fired up the CCC team because their rider was disqualified from the race, and they're working now to bring Tonkov a little bit closer up to Simoni. It seems like they've put so much into it. Now it's gone up to 20 seconds. So what would that be, a 10-second lead? Or
See, you told me you were no good. That's not bad.
Well, don't forget, Bob, he's got to cross the line in first place. Yeah. It's 20 seconds for the win, 12 seconds for second place, and 8 seconds for third place. He will have calculated that right now. What he's doing is giving everything into the success of the breakaway. Baranovsky on the front. There are 3 riders from Kelme there trying to whip up the pacemaking, but I think they've actually left it just a little bit too long, and this will give a 30-kilometre success move by Gilberto Simoni, and I did not think that was going to happen.
Last kilometre, so all of the efforts at least is going to result in a prize on the day for Simoni. Will it be the 4th or will it be the win? You get $3,500, by the way, if you win the stage any day in the Giro d'Italia. And now is Kurt Arvidsson trying to be also the first Norwegian to win a stage for Norway since 1986, and he's gone.
That's Simoni. Simoni, I think, has gone out of the front there. That was an absolutely superb move, and it's Tirolongo trying to pull him back.
So this is an incredible show of defiance. He wants that 20 seconds. If he gets it, then the clock certainly will play its crucial role today on the destiny of tomorrow's pink jersey. And Gilberto Simoni has made his move here now. His teammate is sat up. Here comes the 2 behind, though. Are they going to get on? You can see the road surface slightly greasy as the rain starts to come down very slightly. They've got him. Now Simoni is in trouble now because Kurt Arvidsson is a very good sprinter. Tirolongo has never had such a good finish either in the Giro. He's leading out, but here comes Arvidsson now. Remember that Dager Peterson was the last man to win a stage for Norway in 1986. And now the Team Fatka, which is a Danish team, gets the victory. Tirolongo is upset, and in third place, taking an 8-second bonus, is Gilberto Simoni. Now the seconds are ticking away. One thing's for sure, it'll be very, very close indeed.
Well, it needs to be 23 seconds on the line if there's a change in the overall classification. It's already up to 16 seconds. There's a mad dash right now, and if it goes outside the 23 seconds, and it's going to go very close to that, well, it has gone outside the 23. We're not calling the first man across the line because the most important thing for us today was that time difference. The unofficial time difference, Phil, is 25 seconds. That will make 33 seconds. That will put Simoni into the lead by 2 seconds.
Well, can you believe that? This is a very, very tight tour, and I think that man's probably now saying, well, it's touch and go, Stefano. You could well have lost the lead by 2 seconds, but that man at one stage was a minute behind, and he fought back to almost catch the breakaway. Anyway, the winner is Kurt Atle Arvidsson of Norway. Simoni, we think, is in the pink. We'll know very soon. Let's take a short break, come back for the presentations, and find out with us. See you in a moment. Well, this is a vital sprint here, not just for the man who wins, the champion of Norway, Arvesen, but also for Gilberto Simoni. Has he gained enough time to become the new leader of the Tour? I can tell you it is desperately close, and that they are saying, in fact, that Garzelli has kept his lead by 2 seconds as Kurt Assel Arvesen gets his first ever victory in the Giro d'Italia, and indeed Norway's first victory since Dag Erik Petersen back in 1986. Well, Paul, they've done the maths, and they're saying a 2-second advantage only for Stefano Garzelli.
I'm a bit surprised about that because the time gap was given between the breakaway of 3 and Simone at 26 seconds. So maybe we'll just have to wait a little while longer as we look at the overall results there. You can see we're given Paolo Tirolongo and Gilberto Simoni a 1-second deficit, and that may well be a very important deficit at the end of the day. Juliano Figueras, we're saying, came in 10 seconds behind, but we'll have to see just exactly what that was, Phil, because I think it was an awful lot longer than 10 seconds when the main field came charging up that finishing straight.
Well, I think absolutely right, and we saw the counting on the screen, which made it a lot longer, so that is very suspicious. But at the moment they are saying that the lead remains on the shoulders of the man who had it at the start, Stefano Garzelli. Remember that sometimes the transponders confuse the referees in these early results. So the riders themselves are just going to have to wait and see what the men will say about it. We're looking down at the finishing line here at what has turned out to be quite an excellent stage. And I think you'll agree with us, that was a great piece of cycling. It was a tough route today, Paul. My hats go off to Simone. That was a cheeky attack, but it was clearly a planned move.
It was a very brave move, Phil, I have to say. You know, that was quite remarkable to attack, and nobody was actually expecting it. Everyone talked about the Trebbio being a very difficult climb, which it was. It was 7 kilometers long. But in fact, what they did not expect the attack to come the climb before.
Bob, that was the move of style of sort of Eddie Merckx, so the
Yes.
grand cyclist, but, you know, to make a cheeky attack.
Yes, absolutely. A rider with a tremendous amount of confidence would put an attack like that. Back in the old days of cycling, a guy like Bernard Hinault was reminiscent of, or Eddie Merckx most certainly. They will have no fear of the race course at all, and all they want to do day after day is wear down their rivals. I think that the gap was wrong there that they gave on our graphic and then in official results. We'll see what it looks like overnight, but once they award the pink jersey, it's kind of hard to go back and give it to somebody else. We're going to go to the podiums and see if we can sort it all out, and here is the stage for Arvesen, the Norwegian, on the Facta team. They've been so aggressive throughout this Giro.